In this video, we're diving into some of the wildest Simpsons theories out there. So, sit back, relax, and let's start with the first one. The idea that Homer Simpson might actually be immortal because his brain is too dumb to tell his body it should be dead. So, I've been thinking about this, and it's actually kind of messed up. Homer might literally be immortal, and we've all been watching it happen without realizing how weird that is. Every cartoon character survives crazy stuff, right? But Homer is different. The show actually shows us the injuries and then shows us that he heals in ways that make no sense. In Homerpalooza, Homer gets shot in the stomach by a cannon at point-blank range. The cannonball hits him so hard that it should have torn through his organs and killed him instantly. Instead, the cannonball just bounces off his stomach and he walks around like nothing happened. The doctor later explains that Homer has so much fatty tissue protecting his organs that he's basically bulletproof. But that's not how human biology works. Fat doesn't make you invincible. But the Homer episode is where things get really wild. Homer goes to the hospital and they discover he's had a crayon lodged in his brain since childhood. When they remove it, Homer becomes a genius overnight. He can suddenly understand complex mathematics, appreciate fine art, and engage in intellectual conversations. This proves that Homer's stupidity isn't natural. It's caused by literal brain damage that's been affecting him for decades. Here's the thing that gets me thinking. When Homer has the crayon removed and becomes smart, he's absolutely miserable. He starts understanding how terrible his life actually is. He sees that his job is dangerous and pointless. He realizes his friends are idiots. He comprehends that his family doesn't respect him. The intelligence makes him aware of every horrible truth about his existence. So, he begs them to put the crayon back in his brain because being stupid is the only way he can be happy. But what if the crayon is doing more than just making him dumb? What if it's actually protecting him by preventing his brain from registering damage or telling his body to die from injuries? Think about how many times Homer should have died throughout the series. He's fallen off cliffs, been electrocuted hundreds of times at the nuclear plant, survived explosions, gotten crushed by heavy objects, been poisoned, and suffered countless head injuries. In one episode, he gets his thumb stuck in a bottle and has to go to the hospital. The doctor looks at his x-rays and sees that Homer's skeleton is completely shattered from years of injuries. His skull shows multiple fractures. His spine is bent in impossible ways. Every bone in his body has been broken at least once. The doctor is amazed Homer can even walk, let alone function normally. Compare that to other characters in Springfield. When Moe gets hurt, he actually suffers. When Burns faces health problems, they're treated seriously with real consequences. When Barney damages his body with alcohol, we see genuine deterioration, but Homer bounces back from everything. He gets injured in horrific ways that would hospitalize normal people for months, and by the next scene, he's completely fine. Like biology doesn't apply to him. The most disturbing part is how the crayon in his brain might be the key to understanding this. Normal brains send signals to the body about pain, damage, and when systems are failing. They tell you when something is wrong so you can seek help, or at least acknowledge that you're dying. But Homer's brain has been compromised since childhood. The crayon might be blocking the neural pathways that would normally register fatal injuries. His brain literally cannot process the information that his body should be shutting down. In the episode where Homer eats the poisonous fugu fish, he's told he has 24 hours to live. He spends the entire episode preparing for death, making peace with everyone, and saying goodbye. But when the 24 hours pass, he's completely fine. The doctor admits he misread the test results. Homer survived what should have been certain death, and not because of medical intervention. His body just refused to die. Everyone around Homer ages and changes and faces real consequences. Marge gets increasingly worn down by stress. Bart's behavior creates genuine problems. Lisa deals with depression and disappointment. Even Maggie shows growth and development. They're all living normal lives with normal limitations. Homer just keeps going. He never seems to get older or more tired or face lasting consequences for his actions. He maintains the same energy and appetite no matter what happens to his body. That's not resilience. That's being physically unable to be worn down by life. The really messed up part is that Homer will outlive everyone he knows. Marge will age and eventually die. His kids will grow up and pass away. His friends will retire and leave this world. But Homer will still be there, probably still working at the nuclear plant, still drinking at Moe's, making friends with whoever moves into the Flanders house next. He's been rendered biologically immortal by the same brain damage that makes him too stupid to realize what's happened to him. He's optimistic because he has no reason to fear death or injury or aging or any of the stuff that makes normal people careful about life. When you can't truly be harmed, everything becomes a game. The crayon in his brain has turned him into something that exists on a completely different level than everyone else in Springfield. He's playing by different rules because normal rules don't apply to him. That's why he can be so consistently careless without feeling bad about it. That's why he takes extreme risks without considering consequences. That's why he never seems to learn or grow or change. He's genuinely immortal, and that changes everything about his place in the world. Lisa Simpson might be the smartest person in Springfield, but that intelligence has cursed her to see exactly how hopeless her future really is. Multiple future episodes show us Lisa as an adult, and every single one reveals the same disturbing truth. She never escapes Springfield. In Lisa's wedding, we see her as a college graduate engaged to a British man, but the relationship falls apart when he can't handle how embarrassing her family is. In Bart to the Future, Lisa becomes president of the United States, but she's still cleaning up after Bart's failures and dealing with the same family dysfunction that's haunted her since childhood. In future drama, she's attending Springfield University because she couldn't afford to leave. The show keeps giving us glimpses of Lisa's future, and they all confirm she's trapped. But here's where it gets really dark. Lisa is completely aware of this trap, while everyone else around her remains blissfully ignorant. Throughout the series, we see Lisa have multiple breakdowns when she realizes the truth about her situation. In Moaning Lisa, she develops depression so severe she can't even fake happiness anymore. Her music teacher tells her to suppress her feelings and smile through the pain, which is exactly what she does for the rest of her life. She learns at age 8 that expressing her genuine emotions makes people uncomfortable, so she has to pretend everything is fine while suffering internally. Lisa's intelligence means she understands exactly what she's lost and what she'll never have. She knows she's brilliant enough to achieve great things, but she's also smart enough to see all the obstacles preventing her from escaping. Her family can't afford to send her to a good college. Her town has no resources for gifted students. Her father actively sabotages her chances by spending money on his own stupid schemes. Her brother resents her intelligence and tries to drag her down to his level. She's surrounded by people who don't value education, who mock her for reading books, who see her ambitions as pretentious rather than admirable. The most tragic episodes are the ones where Lisa actually gets a chance to escape and then watches it get destroyed. When she qualifies for a private school scholarship, Homer's behavior at the interview ruins her chances. When she gets accepted to a summer camp for gifted children, the family can't afford to send her. When she develops a mentorship with a caring teacher, that teacher moves away. Every door that opens for Lisa gets slammed shut by circumstances beyond her control. Compare this to Homer's experience of disappointment. When Homer fails at something, he gets upset for about 5 minutes, then completely forgets about it and goes back to being happy. His stupidity protects him from understanding the long-term consequences of his failures. When Bart gets in trouble, he doesn't feel genuine remorse or worry about his future. He just moves on to the next prank without reflecting on patterns or consequences. But Lisa processes everything. She understands that each failure is closing off potential futures. She sees how her family's dysfunction is limiting her opportunities. She recognizes the patterns that keep her trapped, but she's too young and powerless to break them. That awareness without agency is what creates her depression. In Lisa the Vegetarian, she makes an ethical choice that isolates her from everyone in town. She's right about the moral issues with eating meat, but being right just makes her more alone. The episode ends with her finding Paul and Linda McCartney, who validate her beliefs, But then they leave, and she's back in Springfield surrounded by people who think she's weird. That's the pattern of her entire life. Brief moments of hope, followed by the crushing reality that she's stuck with people who will never understand her. Think about what it means to be the only smart person in a town full of idiots. You can see every problem clearly, but nobody will listen to your solutions. You understand why things keep going wrong, but you can't fix the systems because you have no power. You know you deserve better, but you're trapped by circumstances that feel designed to keep you down. Lisa's depression isn't just teenage angst or artistic melancholy, it's existential horror. She's been cursed with enough intelligence to see the prison she's in, but not enough power to escape it. And the worst part is watching everyone else in her family be relatively happy in their ignorance, while she suffers with full awareness. The future episodes prove her depression is completely justified. Her fear that she'll never escape Springfield isn't irrational anxiety. It's accurate prediction based on clear observation of her circumstances. Lisa knows she's doomed, and the show keeps confirming she's right to feel hopeless. Look at how the show handles Lisa's suffering compared to other characters' problems. When Homer or Bart face consequences, the episodes end with everything reset to normal. But Lisa's pain accumulates across seasons. Her disappointments build on each other. Her isolation deepens over time. She's the only character whose suffering has genuine continuity because she's the only one who remembers and learns from negative experiences. The really messed up part is that Lisa's intelligence, the thing that should be her greatest asset, has become her worst curse. If she were dumb like Homer, she'd be happy. If she were careless like Bart, she wouldn't worry about her future. But she's smart enough to understand her situation completely, and that understanding is what creates her misery. She'll spend her entire life watching everyone around her be happy in their ignorance while she suffers with full awareness of how meaningless everything is. She'll keep trying to escape, keep getting pulled back, keep seeing the patterns repeat, keep feeling the hope drain away as each year proves her childhood fears were prophetic. Lisa Simpson isn't going through a phase. She's experiencing the psychological consequences of being the only person in Springfield capable of understanding just how trapped they all really are. Next up is the Ned Flanders secret darkness theory. Ned Flanders seems like the nicest guy in Springfield, but his extreme good behavior might actually be a desperate attempt to control something way darker underneath. Hurricane Nettie reveals the truth about what's really going on with Ned. After a hurricane destroys his house, the town rebuilds it terribly, and Ned has a complete psychological breakdown. He starts screaming at everyone, calling his friends and neighbors terrible people, and eventually gets committed to a mental institution. That's when we learn about his past. The flashback shows Ned as a child with beatnik parents who believed in zero discipline. They never told him no, never set boundaries, never corrected his behavior. Young Ned was completely out of control, acting violently and destructively without any consequences. His parents finally took him to Dr. Foster at the University of Minnesota Spankological Protocol Center, where he underwent 8 months of continuous spanking therapy. The treatment created something called the uncluttered technique, which trained Ned to suppress every single negative emotion he ever felt. Think about what that means. Ned wasn't naturally nice. He was a violent, uncontrollable child who had to be beaten into submission through experimental psychiatric treatment that forced him to bury all his rage and aggression deep inside his mind. But here's the thing that gets me thinking. That kind of suppression doesn't make emotions disappear. It just builds pressure that has to come out eventually. Throughout the series, we see moments where Ned's mask slips and the violence underneath shows through. In Hurricane Nettie, his breakdown isn't just yelling. He gets a predatory look in his eyes and starts verbally destroying everyone around him with pinpoint accuracy. He tells Homer that Homer is the worst human being he's ever met and that everyone hates him. He tells Marge she's always bothering everyone and talking when nobody wants to hear her voice. He calls Bart a little punk and Lisa a little snot. These aren't random insults. These are things Ned has been thinking and suppressing for years, and they all come pouring out when his control breaks. The scary part is how much effort Ned puts into maintaining his control every single day. He goes to church multiple times per week, prays constantly, quotes scripture in nearly every conversation, and obsessively follows religious rules. This isn't genuine faith. This is someone using religion as a tool to keep themselves from doing something terrible. Look at his interactions with Homer throughout the series. Homer constantly borrows Ned's stuff without returning it, damages his property, mocks his beliefs, and treats him with zero respect. Any normal person would eventually tell Homer to get lost and stop being friends with him. But Ned can't do that because setting a boundary means acknowledging anger. And acknowledging anger means risking the total loss of control that the uncluttered technique was designed to prevent. When Maud dies, Ned's reaction is telling. He doesn't allow himself to fully grieve or express rage at the situation. Instead, he immediately tries to move on and find another relationship, desperate to maintain the structure and normalcy that keeps him stable. The one time he starts to express anger about her death, he quickly shuts it down and returns to his overly positive persona. His relationship with his children reveals more cracks in the facade. Ned is insanely overprotective and controlling with Rod and Todd, not because he's worried about external dangers, but because he's terrified of them developing the same uncontrollable rage he had as a child. He's trying to give them the structured, rule-based upbringing he never had, but he's doing it with such intensity that it borders on psychological abuse. The most disturbing episodes are the ones where we see Ned in Treehouse of Horror specials. In those episodes, Ned is repeatedly portrayed as a murderer or violent psychopath. While those episodes are supposedly non-canon, they might actually be revealing what Ned would become if his suppression technique ever failed completely. The writers keep putting him in roles as a killer because they understand there's something genuinely dangerous lurking beneath his friendly exterior. Compare Ned's anger management to other characters in Springfield. When Homer gets angry, he has brief outbursts and then immediately calms down. When Moe gets upset, he expresses it and moves on. These characters have normal, healthy anger that comes and goes naturally. But Ned's anger never gets released. It just builds up inside him year after year, creating a pressure cooker situation that could explode at any moment. His obsession with following rules isn't about being a good person. It's about creating external structure to replace the internal control he doesn't have. Every rule he follows, every prayer he says, every church service he attends is him desperately trying to keep the violence contained. He's not living his life. He's constantly fighting to prevent the worst version of himself from taking over. What happens when the uncluttered technique finally fails completely? Hurricane Nettie showed us a preview, but that was just verbal violence. What happens when the physical violence he suppressed as a child finally breaks through? Ned has spent decades building up rage and resentment while forcing himself to stay friendly and positive. That's not a sustainable system. Eventually, something will trigger a breakdown worse than the hurricane. And when it does, the person who emerges won't be the friendly neighbor. Everyone knows. The really twisted part is that everyone in Springfield treats Ned like he's boring or annoying because he's too good. They don't realize they're living next door to someone who's barely keeping himself from becoming the most dangerous person in town. His extreme religiosity and endless patience aren't virtues. They're warning signs that this person is using every tool available to contain something that shouldn't be contained. Every time Ned quotes the Bible or acts overly friendly, he's actually fighting to keep himself from becoming someone who would make Springfield's entire police force look inadequate. The uncluttered technique didn't cure him. It just gave him a better cage, and that cage is showing cracks. Now let's talk about Mr. Burns' diseases keeping him alive theory. Mr. Burns might have discovered the secret to immortality, and it's the opposite of what anyone would expect. He's not healthy. He's so sick that death can't even get to him. In 22 short films about Springfield, Burns goes to the Mayo Clinic for a routine checkup. Dr. Hibbert runs a full medical examination and discovers something that should be medically impossible. Burns has literally every disease known to modern medicine. We're talking about viral infections, bacterial infections, degenerative conditions, cancerous growths, failing organs, and parasitic infestations all happening simultaneously in one person's body. Dr. Hibbert explains it using a door metaphor. He says, imagine all of Burns's diseases are trying to get through a doorway at the same time. They're all pushing and shoving to be the one that kills him, but they're packed so tightly together that none of them can actually get through. He calls this Three Stooges syndrome, after the comedy act where the Three Stooges all try to go through a door at once and get stuck. Burns is literally kept alive by having so many deadly conditions that they're canceling each other out. But here's where it gets really wild. This isn't a new development. Burns has been this sick for his entire adult life, which means this perfect disease equilibrium has kept him alive way longer than anyone should naturally live. The show is inconsistent about Burns's exact age, but various episodes have placed him at over 100 years old. He fought in World War II, he knew Teddy Roosevelt personally, and he's made references to events from the early 1900s that he claims to have witnessed firsthand. His body looks ancient, his movements are weak, and he's clearly physically deteriorating, but he just keeps not dying. His medical treatments throughout the series are completely bizarre and shouldn't work according to any known science. He gets regular transfusions of younger people's blood to stay rejuvenated. He has experimental procedures done that other doctors call insane or impossible. In one episode, they literally drain all his blood and replace it with someone else's blood, which should kill him instantly but somehow makes him feel younger. The assassination attempts and accidents he survives are even more telling. Burns has been shot by Maggie, attacked by angry mobs, poisoned, pushed out of windows, and subjected to various murder plots. Each time, he either survives through impossible circumstances or recovers from injuries that should be fatal. When Maggie shoots him, the bullet lodges in his chest near his heart. He collapses, goes into surgery, and then just walks out of the hospital days later like it was a minor inconvenience. His own body seems to be working against basic biology. In the episode where Bart donates blood to save Burns's life, Burns's body initially rejects the healthy blood because it's not compatible with his disease system. His body has adapted to being sick. It needs the diseases to function. Introducing healthy elements actually makes him worse. Think about what this means for Burns's long-term survival. Normal people die because one disease or one organ failure or one accident becomes fatal. But Burns can't die from any single cause because his body exists in this perfect state of balanced decay. Every system is failing simultaneously, which somehow prevents complete failure. The diseases aren't just keeping him alive physically, they might be affecting his personality and behavior too. Burns's extreme cruelty, his complete lack of empathy, and his twisted worldview could all be symptoms of having every brain disease known to medicine simultaneously affecting his cognitive function. He's not just evil, he's literally brain damaged by dozens of neurological conditions that are somehow keeping each other in check while destroying his humanity. This also explains why Burns is so obsessed with staying rich and powerful. He knows his survival depends on access to the best medical care money can buy. If he ever lost his fortune, he'd lose access to the constant treatments and monitoring that maintain his disease equilibrium. One missed appointment or one delayed procedure could tip the balance and let one disease finally break through and kill him. Burns will outlive everyone in Springfield, not because he's healthy, but because he's achieved a perfect equilibrium of death that makes him unkillable. His body is a walking medical impossibility, a biological paradox that should have collapsed decades ago, but instead has found this bizarre stable state where terminal illness equals immortality. That's not medicine, that's supernatural. Moving forward, we have the Marge's suppressed resentment theory. Bart Simpson's pranks are supposed to be funny childhood rebellion, but when you look at the pattern, he's actually showing all the warning signs of developing antisocial personality disorder. Start with the harmless stuff from early seasons. Bart makes prank phone calls to Moe's Tavern, puts his teacher's desk on the roof, and skateboard through town, causing minor chaos. These are typical kid pranks that don't really hurt anyone. But watch how quickly things escalate throughout the series. Bart steals a video game from a store and shows zero remorse until he's caught. He joins a boy band and helps them scam millions of people without caring about the victims. He accidentally gets Principal Skinner fired and initially doesn't feel bad about destroying a man's career and livelihood. He creates a fake miracle at church to manipulate an entire congregation. He starts a war between the boys and girls at school that results in genuine violence and injuries. He releases a horde of lizards that devastates Springfield's ecosystem. These aren't pranks anymore. These are actions that cause real damage to real people. The most telling thing about Bart isn't the pranks themselves. It's his complete inability to feel authentic remorse afterward. Look at how the show handles Bart's consequences. Whenever he gets caught or realizes he's hurt someone, the episode shows him apologizing and supposedly learning his lesson. But then the very next episode, he's back to the same destructive behavior without any evidence that he internalized the previous lesson. Normal kids who genuinely feel bad about hurting people change their behavior patterns. Bart just cycles through the same destruction pattern without any real character growth. His relationship with Lisa is particularly disturbing. Bart seems to actively resent her intelligence and achievements. He sabotages her projects, mocks her interests, and goes out of his way to make her life harder. When Lisa succeeds at something, Bart's first instinct is to tear her down rather than feel happy for his sister. That's not sibling rivalry. That's someone who genuinely cannot stand to see others do well. The way he treats authority figures reveals even more about his psychology. Bart doesn't just rebel against unfair rules or bad teachers. He targets everyone in positions of authority with equal cruelty. Principal Skinner tries to help Bart repeatedly and gets nothing but mockery and sabotage in return. Mrs. Crabapple genuinely cares about her students despite being burned out, and Bart makes her job a living nightmare. Even when adults show him kindness or try to mentor him, Bart uses that trust to set up bigger pranks or more elaborate schemes. His manipulation skills are way too advanced for a normal kid. Bart knows exactly what to say to get Homer on his side against Marge. He can read people well enough to exploit their weaknesses. He's learned how to fake emotions convincingly enough to get out of trouble. These are sophisticated psychological tactics that shouldn't come naturally to a 10-year-old unless something in his brain is wired differently. The future episodes are the most damning evidence. In Bart to the Future, adult Bart is a deadbeat loser, mooching off Lisa while she's president. In Bart's Friend Falls in Love, we see that Bart's ability to manipulate and betray extends to destroying his best friend's relationship out of jealousy. In various future predictions, Bart never becomes a contributing member of society. He's either in jail, unemployed, or barely scraping by while still causing chaos. The show is telling us that Bart's childhood behavior isn't a phase. It's a preview of his entire life trajectory. Compare Bart's behavior to other kids in Springfield. Milhouse is weak but genuinely nice. Martin is annoying but not cruel. Nelson is a bully, but shows occasional empathy and capacity for change. Ralph is simple but kind-hearted. Even the other troublemakers at school have moments where they display genuine emotion or remorse. Bart stands out as the only kid who consistently chooses cruelty and shows no real capacity for empathy. The strangling provides another layer of darkness. Homer physically abuses Bart on a regular basis, choking him until his face turns blue. This level of violence would create serious trauma in a normal child, but Bart barely reacts to it anymore. He's become desensitized to physical violence in his own home, which makes him more likely to use violence himself without understanding the severity. The abuse Homer inflicts isn't teaching Bart consequences, it's teaching him that violence is how you handle frustration. His treatment of animals is also concerning. In various episodes, Bart has been cruel to Santa's little helper, caught animals for his own amusement, and shown indifference to animal suffering. Cruelty to animals is one of the major warning signs of developing antisocial personality disorder, and Bart displays it repeatedly. The most chilling moments are when Bart shows flashes of genuine intelligence and planning ability. He's clearly smart enough to do well in school if he wanted to, but he deliberately chooses to fail and disrupt. He can organize complex schemes involving multiple people, which shows leadership and strategic thinking. He understands consequences well enough to avoid getting caught most of the time. This isn't a dumb kid acting out. This is someone consciously choosing destructive behavior because it satisfies something inside him that empathy and connection can't reach. Everyone thinks Bart will grow out of it, but what they're actually watching is the formation of someone who will never develop a genuine conscience. Springfield has enabled a child's progression into antisocial personality disorder by treating his cruelty as amusing rather than alarming, and by the time anyone realizes the damage, it'll be too late to fix. But before I tell you about that, subscribe to our channel. Now let's talk about the groundskeeper Willie Rage monster theory. Groundskeeper Willie acts like a comic relief character, but his incredible strength, constant rage, and history of violence suggest Springfield is ignoring a serious threat. Willie is shirtless in almost every appearance, which seems like a running gag about his Scottish heritage and working-class toughness. But look at his physique. The guy is absolutely jacked with visible muscle definition that suggests serious physical power. He's not just in good shape for a janitor. He's built like someone who could genuinely hurt people if he decided to, and he's proven that physical capability multiple times throughout the series. Willie has ripped trees out of the ground with his bare hands, wrestled wolves, survived being set on fire multiple times, and demonstrated superhuman strength in various situations. In one episode, he casually mentions surviving for weeks in the wilderness, eating only moss and rainwater. This isn't normal janitor behavior. This is someone with genuine survival and combat skills. His rage is constant and barely controlled. Willie yells at students, threatens teachers, and responds to minor annoyances with explosive anger. When the school's equipment breaks or kids make messes, Willie doesn't just get frustrated like a normal person. He goes into violent tirades where he explicitly threatens to hurt people. The fact that everyone treats this as comedy rather than legitimate concern is part of what makes it so disturbing. The Treehouse of Horror episodes reveal something even darker about Willie's character. In multiple Halloween specials, Willie is portrayed as a serial killer who murders students and faculty with extreme violence. He shows up as Freddy Krueger, attacking children in their dreams with garden tools. While these episodes are supposedly non-canon, the writers consistently choose Willie as the murderer character, which suggests they understand there's something genuinely dangerous about him that works for those roles. His isolation from the rest of Springfield's community makes him even more concerning. Willie lives alone in a shack on school property with minimal human connection. He's clearly resentful of the students who treat him like he's beneath them, the teachers who order him around, and the administration that underpays him for difficult work. That combination of isolation, physical capability, and accumulated resentment is exactly the profile of someone who eventually snaps. Look at how Willie talks about his past. He mentions fleeing Scotland under mysterious circumstances, fighting in various conflicts, and experiencing severe trauma that he never fully explains. When he does share stories about his history, they involve violence, betrayal, and hardship. Whatever happened to Willie before he came to Springfield clearly damaged him psychologically, and instead of getting help, he's been festering in that damage while working a degrading job that constantly reminds him of his low social status. His access to dangerous equipment is another red flag that nobody seems to worry about. Willie has keys to every part of the school, works with sharp tools and heavy machinery, and knows the building's layout better than anyone. If he ever decided to act on his rage, he'd have every advantage in terms of weapons, knowledge, and opportunity. The scariest part is how close Willie has come to actually hurting people. There are multiple episodes where he physically grabs students or staff members, where he raises tools threateningly, where he starts to lunge at someone before stopping himself. Each time, the show plays it for laughs and everyone moves on, but those are warning signs of escalating aggression that would get someone fired or arrested in any real-world situation. Other characters joke about violence. Willie actually does it. When Homer accidentally ruins Willie's retirement plans, in the episode about the grease, Willie doesn't just complain, he literally attacks Homer and tries to fight him. When Bart plays a prank that gets Willie in trouble, Willie seeks revenge through physical intimidation. His default response to conflict is violence or threats of violence, and Springfield just accepts this as normal behavior from the groundskeeper. Think about someone this angry with this much strength working around children every day. Willie has every reason to resent his situation and the people who've kept him in it. He's treated as lesser by everyone, paid poorly, given no respect, and isolated from meaningful human connection. Those conditions create exactly the kind of pressure that eventually explodes into genuine violence. Willie is a tragedy waiting to happen, and Springfield's biggest mistake is treating him like a joke instead of the genuinely dangerous person he clearly is. Next up is the Maggie Simpson hidden genius theory. Maggie Simpson doesn't talk, but that silence might be a deliberate strategy by someone way smarter than anyone realizes. The most famous example of Maggie's abilities is when she shoots Mr. Burns. The episode plays it as a comedic reveal where baby Maggie accidentally pulls the trigger while reaching for a lollipop Burns took from her. But watch the scene again with the assumption that Maggie knew exactly what she was doing. Burns takes her candy, she reaches for his gun, and she shoots him in a way that incapacitates him without killing him. That's either the luckiest accident in television history or calculated action by someone who understood the mechanics of firearms and human anatomy well enough to execute a precise attack. Throughout the series, Maggie demonstrates problem-solving skills that go way beyond normal infant capabilities. She's escaped from daycare multiple times using complex planning that involves timing, distraction, and understanding of adult behavior patterns. She's navigated dangerous situations that would terrify most adults. She's communicated complex ideas through gestures and actions when she needed to convey specific information. These aren't cute baby moments. These are signs of advanced intelligence operating behind complete silence. Her silence itself is the biggest clue. Most babies Maggie's age would be trying to talk, making sounds, attempting words even if they can't speak clearly yet. Maggie just sucks on her pacifier and observes. She's chosen not to speak, which suggests she's aware that speaking would change how people treat her, and she prefers the current arrangement. Think about what being a baby gives Maggie in terms of strategic advantages. Nobody expects anything from her. She can be present in any room, any conversation, any situation, and adults will talk freely around her because they assume she can't understand what they're saying. She has complete freedom of information access while maintaining zero accountability for her actions. If something goes wrong, nobody blames the baby. That's an incredibly powerful position for someone who actually understands everything happening around them. Her relationship with Homer reveals more about her intelligence. In several episodes, Maggie has saved Homer's life or solved problems that Homer created. She's rescued him from drowning, guided him to safety, and intervened in dangerous situations with perfect timing. A normal baby wouldn't have the awareness or capability to execute these rescues, but someone with advanced intelligence who cares about their father and understands danger would be able to act exactly as Maggie does. The daycare episodes show Maggie's leadership abilities. She organizes the other babies, plans elaborate escapes, and demonstrates tactical thinking that shouldn't be possible for an infant. In one episode, she leads a revolt against the cruel daycare workers using coordinated baby actions that require planning, communication, and understanding of group dynamics. That's not instinct. That's someone who can assess situations, identify problems, develop solutions, and motivate others to follow a plan. Her artistic abilities provide another window into her mind. When Maggie draws or paints, she creates surprisingly sophisticated images that show understanding of perspective, symbolism, and emotional expression. These aren't random scribbles that adults interpret generously. They're genuine artistic efforts that reveal someone processing complex thoughts and feelings. But here's where it gets really interesting. Maggie maintains her baby status despite being physically capable of much more. She still uses her pacifier constantly, still crawls instead of walking consistently, still acts helpless in situations where she could clearly help herself. This suggests she's deliberately performing babyhood because it benefits her more than growing up would. Look at what happens to kids who grow up in Springfield. They go to a terrible school, deal with bullies, face pressure to conform to mediocrity, and eventually become adults trapped in the same miserable cycles as everyone else. Maggie has seen what happened to Bart and Lisa. She's observed how growing up in Springfield destroys potential and crushes dreams. By staying a baby, she avoids all of that while maintaining her unique position of observation and influence. The show has run for decades and Maggie hasn't aged, which could just be cartoon logic. But what if it's also Maggie's choice? What if she's figured out how to exist outside the normal flow of time and growth in Springfield because she's operating on a level of consciousness that transcends the rules everyone else follows? Her pacifier serves multiple functions beyond comfort. It keeps her from accidentally speaking, gives her something to do while she's thinking, and creates a visual identity that reinforces the baby persona she's maintaining. Remove the pacifier, and people might start expecting her to talk. Keep the pacifier, and she can continue her silent observation indefinitely. The really messed up part is that Maggie's family has no idea who they're living with. They think they're raising a baby, but they're actually cohabitating with possibly the smartest person in Springfield who's chosen to hide her intelligence because she's recognized that being underestimated provides more power than being recognized ever could. Maggie will probably never speak because she's realized that being underestimated gives her more power than any amount of talking ever could. Now let's talk about the Springfield nuclear plant causing mutations theory. Springfield isn't just a weird town with quirky characters. It's a population that's been slowly mutating from radiation exposure for so long that genetic abnormalities have become normal. The most obvious evidence is Blinky, the three-eyed fish that lives in the river near the nuclear plant. When Blinky first appears, it's treated as proof of the plant's environmental damage, but then everyone just accepts that three-eyed fish are normal now and moves on. The Springfield Lake is full of mutated creatures, the water glows occasionally, and nobody treats this as an ongoing crisis that requires immediate action. They've normalized living next to a nuclear disaster, but the mutations go way deeper than the local wildlife. Look at the physical characteristics of Springfield's human population, and tell me those are normal biological variations. Mr. Burns looks like he's been dead for 20 years, but his body hasn't figured it out yet. His skin is translucent, his bones are visible through his flesh, and he has the physical capabilities of someone who should be in a grave, not running a business. That's not just old age. That's what happens when someone's been exposed to radiation for decades and their cells can't maintain normal human structure anymore. Comic book. Guy's size isn't just obesity. The episode where they show his heart reveals that his internal organs have adapted to support a body mass that should be medically impossible. He's not just overweight. His entire biological system has mutated to accommodate extreme size in ways that normal human metabolism can't achieve. Homer's ability to survive radiation poisoning, have a crayon permanently lodged in his brain, and bounce back from injuries that should kill him all point to someone whose body has been altered at a cellular level. His fat doesn't just cushion impacts, it's somehow been modified to absorb and deflect damage in ways that human tissue normally can't. The yellow skin is the most obvious mutation that everyone ignores. Every member of the Simpson family, along with most of Springfield's population, has bright yellow skin. The show never addresses this as unusual, but think about what it actually means. Yellow skin is a symptom of jaundice, liver failure, or exposure to certain chemicals and radiation. An entire town with yellow skin suggests generational exposure to toxins that have altered their fundamental biology. But here's where it gets really disturbing. The mutations aren't random, they're systematic, and they've been normalized to the point where Springfield residents can't even recognize them as abnormal anymore. Krusty the Clown has green hair and exaggerated facial features that change shape between episodes. Marge's hair defies gravity and physics, standing straight up in a way that normal hair simply cannot do without chemical alteration or biological abnormality. Sideshow, Bob's massive feet are played for comedy, but feet that large on a normal human frame would indicate severe hormonal or genetic mutations. The children show the mutations most clearly, because they haven't learned to hide them yet. Bart has severe behavioral problems that might stem from neurological damage caused by prenatal radiation exposure. Lisa's depression and advanced intelligence could be opposite reactions to the same mutagenic forces affecting her brain chemistry. Maggie's extended infancy and advanced problem-solving represent another form of developmental mutation. Think about Springfield Elementary School. The building is literally falling apart, filled with asbestos, and sits on toxic ground that occasionally leaks dangerous chemicals. The children attend this school every day, breathing contaminated air and drinking tainted water from the fountains. Multiple episodes show the cafeteria food is barely food at all, possibly contaminated with industrial waste. These kids are being exposed to mutation-causing agents throughout their entire childhood development. Ralph Wiggum's cognitive differences, Milhouse's extreme physical weakness, Martin Prince's advanced intelligence combined with physical frailty, all of these could be different expressions of the same underlying cause, radiation-induced genetic damage being expressed in various ways across the population. Compare Springfield to other towns shown in the series. When the Simpsons travel to other cities, the people there look relatively normal. They don't have yellow skin, bizarre hair, or the extreme physical variations seen in Springfield. This proves Springfield is unique in its mutations, which makes sense given that it's built around a nuclear power plant with constant safety violations. The plant itself provides evidence of ongoing contamination. Homer regularly comes home covered in radioactive material. The cooling towers leak visible waste into the environment. Multiple episodes show the plant nearly melting down or releasing dangerous materials into Springfield's water and air. Burns consistently prioritizes profit over safety, cutting corners and ignoring regulations that would prevent contamination. Look at how the medical community in Springfield treats these abnormalities. Dr. Hibbert sees patients with impossible conditions and just laughs about it, instead of questioning why an entire town's population has such bizarre medical presentations. Either he's been bribed to stay quiet about the mutations, or he's so contaminated himself that he can't recognize abnormal biology anymore. The really scary part is the generational aspect. Marge's mother has blue hair. Marge has blue hair. The Simpson children have unusual hair colors and textures. This suggests the mutations are being passed down genetically, getting more pronounced with each generation. What started as environmental contamination has now become embedded in Springfield's genetic code. The town's collective inability to recognize their situation mirrors how actual radiation victims in places like Chernobyl initially couldn't comprehend what was happening to them. When everyone around you has similar mutations, the abnormal becomes normal. Yellow skin isn't weird if everyone has it. Three-eyed fish aren't concerning if they've been swimming in the river for 20 years. Massive health problems aren't alarming if the entire community is sick. Burns built his plant with minimal safety measures, contaminated an entire region's environment, and created a population of mutated humans who are too damaged to recognize what's been done to them. And he keeps getting away with it because the people he's poisoned can't comprehend that their reality is fundamentally wrong. Springfield isn't quirky. It's a town full of people whose bodies have been permanently altered by corporate negligence, and they're also mutated. They can't even recognize it anymore. Moving forward, we have the Krusty the Clown's secret depression theory. Krusty the Clown's life looks like a series of bad decisions, but it's actually a systematic pattern of self-destruction caused by unresolved childhood trauma. Like Father, Like Clown shows us the root of everything wrong with Krusty. His father, Rabbi Hyman Christofsky, wanted him to follow in his footsteps and become a rabbi. Young Krusty wanted to be an entertainer instead. When Krusty chose comedy over religion, his father completely disowned him, cut him off emotionally, refused to speak to him, treated him as dead. That kind of rejection from a parent doesn't just hurt. It creates a wound that never actually heals. Krusty built his entire career trying to prove he made the right choice. He became famous, made millions, created an empire around his clown persona. But none of that success filled the hole his father's rejection created. When he finally reconciles with his father in that episode, it's portrayed as this heartwarming moment. But watch Krusty's behavior after the reconciliation. Nothing actually changes about his self-destructive patterns. The reconciliation didn't fix him because the damage was already permanent. Throughout the series, Krusty shows every sign of someone using entertainment as self-medication for deep psychological pain. He's not performing because he loves it. He's performing because it's the only thing that temporarily makes him feel valuable after his father taught him he was worthless for being himself. His addictions tell the whole story. Krusty is addicted to gambling, losing massive amounts of money on bets he knows he'll lose. He's addicted to pornography, to the point where it's referenced constantly. He uses drugs and alcohol heavily enough that multiple episodes show him in rehab or dealing with substance abuse consequences. These aren't separate problems. They're all the same problem, expressing itself in different ways. He's trying to fill a void that can't be filled. Look at his relationships with women throughout the series. Krusty has been married multiple times, engaged even more often, and every single relationship ends in disaster. He gets close to someone, starts to open up emotionally, then sabotages the relationship before it can become real. He did this with Eartha Kitt, with multiple other women, always finding a way to destroy something good before it has a chance to make him vulnerable. That's textbook behavior for someone who learned as a child that being yourself leads to abandonment. If you show people who you really are, they'll reject you like your father did. So you keep people at a distance, use them for temporary comfort, and push them away before they can hurt you first. His treatment of Bart reveals more about his psychology. When Bart becomes Krusty's assistant, Krusty is initially terrible to him. He's cruel, dismissive, and exploitative. But occasionally Krusty shows genuine affection for Bart, almost like he sees himself in this kid who's also rejected and misunderstood by authority figures. Those moments of real connection terrify Krusty, so he immediately returns to treating Bart badly to reestablish emotional distance. The multiple times Krusty has tried to quit or retire show that he knows he's trapped. In Krusty Gets Canceled, he loses his show and seems ready to walk away from entertainment entirely. But he can't do it. He needs the validation too much. Even when he's successful and doesn't need the money, he keeps coming back because performing is the only thing that temporarily convinces him he's not worthless. His financial disasters aren't about being dumb with money. They're about unconsciously punishing himself. Krusty makes millions and then immediately loses it through gambling, bad investments, or IRS problems. He builds himself up and then tears himself down in a cycle that mirrors his relationship with his father. Gain approval, lose it, desperately try to gain it back. Again, the really tragic episodes are the ones where Krusty has moments of genuine happiness or peace, and you can watch him actively destroy it because he doesn't believe he deserves it. When things are going well, Krusty finds ways to create chaos and misery because that's the emotional state he's familiar with. Happiness feels wrong to him. His comedy itself has become a form of self-harm. He takes pratfalls that genuinely hurt him, performs degrading acts for laughs, and allows himself to be humiliated for entertainment. What looks like dedication to his craft is actually someone who's learned to turn their own suffering into a product that others consume. The show business environment enables all of this. Everyone around Krusty profits from his dysfunction. His agent books him constantly without concern for his well-being. The network exploits his desperation to stay relevant. His hangers-on encourage his addictions because it keeps him dependent. Nobody actually helps him heal because a healthy Krusty might not be as profitable as a broken one. Krusty will never stop being a clown because the person who needed his father's approval is still a child inside, and that child never learned how to be happy. The persona has become a prison he can't escape, and every laugh from the audience is just another temporary hit of validation that fades the moment the applause stops. Next up is the Principal Skinner identity theft theory. One episode revealed Principal Skinner isn't actually Seymour Skinner at all, and while everyone pretends that episode doesn't exist, it might be revealing the darkest truth about Springfield's collective delusion. The principal and the pauper drops a bomb that completely destroys everything we thought we knew about Skinner's character. A man shows up in Springfield claiming to be the real Seymour Skinner, decorated war hero and Agnes Skinner's actual son. The Skinner we've known for years is actually Armin Tamzarian, a street punk from Capital City who served under the real Skinner in Vietnam. When the real Skinner was presumed dead, Armin took his identity, moved to Springfield, and has been living as Seymour Skinner ever since. This revelation should have massive implications for everyone in Springfield. The principal of their school has been living under a stolen identity for decades. He's been lying to his mother, his colleagues, the entire town about who he fundamentally is. This isn't a small deception. This is identity fraud on a massive scale. But here's the thing that makes this really messed up. After the real Skinner shows up and everyone learns the truth, the town decides they prefer the fake Skinner. They literally vote to kick the real Seymour Skinner out of town and legally mandate that Armin Tamzarian will continue being called Seymour Skinner, and that nobody is allowed to speak about what they learned ever again. A judge makes it official town policy to participate in Armin's delusion. Think about what this means psychologically for Armin. He came back from Vietnam traumatized, took a dead man's identity, and has been playing that role for so long that his original self has been completely erased. That's not just lying. That's dissociative identity disorder. Armin Tamzarian died and Seymour Skinner replaced him, and now Springfield has legally enforced that replacement. Agnes Skinner's role in this is particularly dark. She knows her real son is alive and being forced to leave town. She knows the man living in her house isn't actually her child, but she chooses the fake Seymour because he's the one who's been serving her needs, following her rules, and meeting her expectations. She doesn't want her real son back. She wants the obedient replacement who's been conditioned to obey her. That's not motherhood, that's ownership. The real Skinner gets literally kicked out of his own life. He returns to find someone has been living as him, and instead of getting justice or recognition, he's told to leave because the imposter is more convenient for everyone. Springfield would rather participate in a mass delusion than deal with the uncomfortable truth that they've been fooled for years. For Armin, this legal mandate to never speak of his real identity again is the final step in completely destroying whatever remained of his original self. He tried to come clean, tried to admit the truth, and Springfield responded by forcing him deeper into the lie. The town became his accomplice in maintaining a false identity. This explains so much about Skinner's behavior throughout the rest of the series. His desperate need for approval from authority figures makes sense. If he's constantly terrified, someone will discover he's a fraud. His inability to stand up for himself or make independent decisions fits perfectly with someone who's abandoned their own identity entirely. His awkwardness and social anxiety could stem from never being sure which version of himself he's supposed to be in any given moment. The episode is often considered non-canon because it's so controversial and weird. But what if that's exactly why it matters? What if this episode is revealing a truth about Springfield that's too uncomfortable to acknowledge, so everyone agrees to pretend it didn't happen? The town's response within the episode mirrors the audience's response to the episode itself. When faced with uncomfortable truth, just agree to never speak of it again. Springfield didn't just let a man steal someone's identity. They legally mandated that everyone participate in his psychological break because the truth was too uncomfortable to handle. The entire town became accessories to identity fraud, and they did it knowingly, willingly, and officially. Look at how Skinner acts in episodes after this one. There are occasional references to his identity crisis, but mostly everyone just goes back to calling him Seymour Skinner and pretending nothing happened. That's not continuity error. That's exactly what the town voted to do. They decided that comfortable lies are better than difficult truths. The most disturbing part is what this says about Springfield's relationship with reality itself. When confronted with evidence that contradicts their preferred narrative, they don't adjust to truth. They adjust truth to fit their preferences. They're willing to gaslight an entire population, including themselves, to avoid dealing with uncomfortable facts. Armin is living a court-ordered delusion. Every day he wakes up and has to be Seymour Skinner, not because he chose to continue the deception, but because Springfield legally requires it. His mother calls him Seymour, knowing he's not her son. His colleagues work with him, knowing his credentials are stolen. Everyone participates in maintaining a fiction they all know is false. That's not healing from trauma. That's trauma being codified into law. Now let's talk about the Moe Szyslak serial killer theory. Moe Szyslak constantly talks about suicide and violence like they're jokes, but his history and behavior suggests someone with a genuinely dark past who might be one bad day away from doing something terrible. The suicide attempts are frequent and disturbingly specific. Moe doesn't just make vague comments about being sad. He describes detailed methods he's considered or attempted. Hanging, poison, drowning, jumping off buildings. He mentions these casually in conversation like they're normal thoughts everyone has. In one episode, he's literally standing on a bridge ready to jump before Maggie accidentally saves him. That's not comedy. That's someone who's genuinely suicidal, just being prevented from following through by circumstances. His violent history keeps getting referenced in ways that suggest it's not exaggeration. Moe mentions being wanted by the Russian mafia. He talks about doing time in prison. He has detailed knowledge of criminal operations that goes way beyond what a normal bartender would know. When he describes violent scenarios, he speaks with the specificity of someone who's actually experienced them, not someone making things up for shock value. The way he obsesses over women crosses the line from lonely to genuinely creepy. His fixation on Marge goes beyond just finding her attractive. He stalks her, fantasizes about her in disturbing ways, and has elaborate plans for how he'd pursue her if Homer died. When he develops crushes on other women, the pattern is the same. Obsessive behavior, boundary violations, inability to accept rejection, and increasingly desperate attempts to force connection. His bar has a mysterious basement that gets referenced occasionally, but never fully explained. What's down there? Why does Moe get defensive when people ask about it? In various episodes, we see glimpses of the basement containing strange equipment, questionable materials, and spaces that suggest purposes beyond normal bar storage. Moe's reaction when anyone gets close to discovering what's down there is immediate panic and aggression. Look at the moments when Moe's mask slips and genuine violence comes through. When he's angry, he doesn't just yell. He grabs weapons, threatens people with specific harm, and shows fighting skills that indicate real training or extensive experience with violence. He keeps a shotgun behind the bar that he pulls on customers regularly. Most bartenders don't respond to rowdy patrons by aiming firearms at them. His complete isolation makes everything worse. Moe has no real friends, despite running a bar where people gather socially. Homer and the other regulars use his bar for their own purposes, but don't actually care about Moe as a person. When Moe needs help or support, nobody shows up for him. He's spent decades serving a community that sees him as a service provider rather than a human being with needs and feelings. The phone pranks from Bart reveal how Moe responds to mockery and humiliation. Most people would get annoyed or ban the caller. Moe threatens extreme violence, grabs weapons, and works himself into genuine rage over prank calls. His reactions are disproportionate to the offense, which suggests someone whose anger management is barely functional and could explode into real violence with the right trigger. His various failed business ventures show someone desperate to escape his current life but lacking the skills or connections to make legitimate change happen. When Moe tries to rebrand the bar, start new businesses, or pursue other opportunities, they all fail because he sabotages himself through his own misery and poor decision-making. He's trapped in a cycle where his depression prevents success and failure deepens his depression. But here's where it gets genuinely scary. Moe has the means, the motive, and increasingly little reason not to act on his darkest impulses. He has weapons. He has a history of violence. He's isolated, depressed, and consumed by rage at a world that's rejected him repeatedly. He's made multiple suicide attempts, which means he's already overcome the basic human survival instinct. Someone who's willing to kill themselves is often only a small step away from being willing to kill others. The Russian mafia connection isn't throwaway dialogue. Multiple episodes reference it, suggesting Moe actually did something serious enough to make him a target for organized crime. What did he do? Who did he hurt? The show never explains, which makes it more disturbing because our imagination fills in worse scenarios than they'd probably show explicitly. His relationship with his bar is the only thing giving him any structure or purpose. If he lost the bar, what would stop him from completely spiraling? The building itself is falling apart, the business barely makes money, and his customers don't respect him. He's one health code violation or one bad financial month away from losing the only thing anchoring him to civilized society. Mo isn't funny sad. He's genuinely broken, and the only reason he hasn't done something irreversible is because he's too depressed to follow through on his darkest impulses. But depression isn't a permanent safeguard. Eventually, something will push him over the edge, and when it does, Springfield will discover they've been serving drinks to someone capable of terrible violence the whole time. But before we get into that, subscribe to our channel. Up next, we've got the Sideshow Bob Genius Trapped Theory. Sideshow Bob is treated like a villain, but what if his rage at Bart is actually completely justified, and we've been watching a smart person's descent into madness caused by a society that punishes intelligence? The original incident that starts Bob's criminal career is worth examining carefully. Bob was Krusty's sideshow, an educated, cultured man playing second fiddle to a vulgar clown. He was miserable in the role, but needed the work. When he finally snapped and framed Krusty for armed robbery, it wasn't random villainy. It was someone who'd been degraded and humiliated for years, finally trying to take control of his own life. Krusty treated Bob like garbage, used him as a punching bag both literally and figuratively, and profited from Bob's talent while giving him no respect or compensation. Then Bart exposes Bob's scheme and gets him sent to prison. Here's the thing, though. Bart was right that Bob framed Krusty. But was Krusty actually innocent of everything? Krusty runs a show that's been shown to be dangerous to children. He's negligent, he's corrupt, and he treats everyone around him terribly. Bob trying to take over the show wasn't about evil. It was about replacing incompetence and cruelty with someone who actually cared about quality entertainment. But Bart ruins it, and Bob goes to prison. A highly educated man with refined tastes gets thrown into a brutal prison system where he's surrounded by actual violent criminals. That experience would traumatize anyone, but for someone as sensitive and cultured as Bob, it's psychological torture. When Bob gets out and tries to go straight, Springfield won't let him. He attempts to become the Republican candidate for mayor, and even though he's clearly the most qualified person ever to run for that office, the town treats him with suspicion because of his past. He tries to work in legitimate entertainment, but his criminal record prevents opportunities. Society has decided he's a villain, so they'll never let him be anything else. His actual policy proposals when he runs for mayor are sensible. Better infrastructure, improved education, cultural enrichment for the town. But Springfield prefers the corrupt, incompetent Mayor Quimby because at least he's familiar. Bob represents change and intelligence, which threatens people who've built their lives around mediocrity. Look at how Springfield treats intelligence throughout the series. Smart people like Lisa are mocked and isolated. Professor Frink's inventions are ignored until disasters prove he was right. Comic book guys' knowledge is treated as pathetic rather than valuable. The town actively punishes people for being smarter than average. Bob's crime wasn't framing Krusty. His crime was being too intelligent for a town that resents intelligence. Every time Bob tries to reform, something happens that pushes him back toward villainy. The legal system fails him repeatedly. He's wrongfully convicted, sentenced to excessive punishments, and denied basic rights that other criminals receive. When he's legitimately wronged by the system, nobody cares because he's been labeled a criminal. So anything bad that happens to him is seen as deserved. His obsession with killing Bart makes sense from his perspective. Bart represents everything Bob hates about Springfield. Bart is rewarded for being destructive, stupid, and cruel. Bart faces no real consequences for ruining lives and causing chaos. Bart embodies a society that values disruption over creation, ignorance over knowledge, and chaos over order. Eliminating Bart isn't just revenge, it's Bob trying to remove the symbol of everything that destroyed his life. When Bob finally gets what he wants and becomes mayor legitimately in one episode, he actually does a good job. The town improves under his leadership. Crime goes down, infrastructure gets better, cultural programs get funded. He's proving he could have been a positive force for Springfield if they'd given him the chance. But they kick him out again because people prefer familiar dysfunction to unfamiliar competence. The fact that Bob is constantly thwarted by impossible coincidences and cartoon physics suggests the universe itself is against him. He creates elaborate, carefully planned schemes that should work, but they fail because of random accidents that defy probability. It's like reality is punishing him for trying to impose order and intelligence on a chaotic, stupid world. His brother Cecil's story reinforces this pattern. Cecil is also highly educated and talented, but Springfield rejected him too. The brothers represent what happens to intelligent people in a society designed to crush anyone who threatens the comfortable mediocrity of the majority. Cecil turned to crime for the same reasons Bob did. Their intelligence became their curse because the world they lived in had no use for it. Think about Bob's cultural references and knowledge. He quotes Shakespeare, enjoys opera, appreciates fine art and literature. These aren't affectations. They're genuine interests that bring him joy. But Springfield mocks these interests, seeing them as pretentious rather than enriching. Bob is surrounded by people who think culture is boring and intelligence is threatening. When Bob gets honest work at the nuclear plant, he's good at it and seems to find some peace. But even there, his past follows him. His coworkers distrust him, management watches him constantly, and he's never allowed to just be a normal employee because everyone remembers he's the criminal genius. The town won't let him escape his past, even when he's genuinely trying to reform. The rake scene that's become iconic shows Bob's life in miniature. He steps on rakes repeatedly, getting hit in the face over and over while making pained sounds. That's not slapstick. That's a visual metaphor for his entire existence. Every time he tries to move forward, something hits him in the face and knocks him back. The rakes are Springfield's refusal to let intelligent people succeed. Bob isn't a villain trying to kill an innocent child. He's a brilliant man, driven to extremes by a world that punished him for being smart and rewarded Bart for being a destructive brat. If Springfield had valued intelligence over chaos, Bob would have been a cultural leader instead of a serial killer, but they made their choice and created their own monster. Now let's talk about the Smithers-Stockholm Syndrome theory. Wayland Smithers' relationship with Mr. Burns looks like unrequited love, but it's actually a textbook case of psychological abuse creating a trauma bond that's trapped him completely. Burns treats Smithers like property, not a person. He forgets Smithers' name constantly, calling him by wrong names or just pointing and expecting Smithers to understand. He demands Smithers be available 24/7 for any need, no matter how unreasonable or degrading. He pays Smithers poorly despite requiring complete devotion. He mocks Smithers' feelings, exploits his loyalty, and shows zero appreciation for decades of dedicated service. This isn't a bad boss. This is systematic psychological abuse. The episode where we learn about Smithers' father makes everything darker. Smithers' dad died saving Burns' life at the nuclear plant. Young Wayland watched his father sacrifice himself for Burns, and Burns responded by hiring the orphaned child to work for him. That sounds generous until you realize Burns used a traumatized child's grief to create absolute loyalty. Smithers associated his father's heroism with serving Burns, so serving Burns became his way of honoring his dead father. That's not kindness. That's grooming a traumatized child into lifelong servitude. Smithers has tried to leave multiple times throughout the series. He quits, finds other employment, starts to build an independent life. But he always comes back because Burns has conditioned him to believe he's worthless without Burns. When Smithers works for other people, they appreciate him, and he's successful. But Burns has spent decades convincing Smithers that only Burns truly understands him. Only Burns gives his life meaning. Only Burns can provide what he needs. Classic abuser tactics. The romantic feelings Smithers has for Burns aren't actually love. They're the psychological confusion that happens when someone's been abused for so long they can't distinguish between care and control. Smithers thinks he loves Burns because he's been isolated from healthy relationships and conditioned to interpret abuse as affection. When Burns occasionally shows the tiniest bit of approval, it feels like love to Smithers because he's been starved for positive reinforcement. Look at how Burns responds to Smithers' devotion. He takes it completely for granted. When Smithers is hospitalized or in danger, Burns' first concern is finding a temporary replacement, not Smithers' well-being. When Smithers does something extraordinary, Burns barely acknowledges it. The rare moments where Burns shows any appreciation are so minimal and infrequent that they shouldn't count as positive reinforcement. But to Smithers, they're everything because he's been conditioned to accept crumbs. His life outside of work barely exists. Smithers has a Malibu Stacy collection which he keeps secret because he knows people would mock him for it. His apartment is small and impersonal despite working for one of the richest men in America. He could demand better pay, better living conditions, respect. But he doesn't because Burns has convinced him that serving is its own reward. The control extends to every aspect of Smithers' identity. Burns mocks his sexuality, uses it as ammunition in arguments, and makes homophobic comments regularly. Smithers absorbs this abuse because he's been trained to believe he deserves it. A healthy relationship allows people to be themselves. Burns has created a dynamic where Smithers has to constantly prove his worth while being reminded he's fundamentally flawed. When other characters point out that Burns treats him terribly, Smithers defends Burns, he makes excuses, explains away the abuse, insists that Burns actually does care. Deep down, this is exactly what abuse victims do when they're trauma bonded to their abuser. They've invested so much time and emotional energy into the relationship that admitting it's abusive would mean admitting they've wasted their life. Episodes where Smithers briefly breaks free show what his life could be. He's competent, successful, well-liked by others. People appreciate his organizational skills, his dedication, his knowledge. Away from Burns, Smithers thrives. But Burns always pulls him back using guilt, manipulation, or by exploiting the trauma bond that's been decades in the making. The fact that Smithers knows Burns' schedule, preferences, and needs better than Burns knows anything about Smithers shows the power imbalance. Smithers has erased himself to become an extension of Burns. He's stopped being Whalen and become just Smithers, the assistant, the servant, the thing Burns uses and discards as needed. This is his entire identity now. If he left Burns, who would he be? What would he do? Burns has successfully made Smithers believe that his only value comes from serving, and that belief is what keeps the trap closed. Smithers will never escape Burns because decades of abuse have rewired his brain to believe his only value comes from serving someone who doesn't even see him, even as human. Next up is the Treehouse of Horror reality bleed theory. Everyone treats Treehouse of Horror episodes like they don't count, but what if they're actually showing the truth about Springfield that the regular episodes carefully hide? The pattern is too consistent to ignore. In regular episodes, Willie is an angry janitor who makes threats. In Treehouse of Horror, Willie is a serial killer who actually murders people. In regular episodes, Homer is selfish and stupid. In horror episodes, Homer becomes genuinely evil, killing people without remorse. These aren't random character changes. They're the same characters with the filter removed. Willie appears as the murderer in multiple Halloween episodes. He's Freddy Krueger, killing students in their dreams. He's the groundskeeper who hunts people with garden tools. Every time there's a slasher story, Willie is the obvious choice for killer. The writers keep putting him in that role because they understand something dark about his character that regular episodes have to keep suppressed for comedy. His rage in normal episodes is barely controlled violence that occasionally erupts in physical attacks. In horror episodes, that violence gets to express itself fully. The difference isn't that horror Willie is fundamentally different. It's that horror Willie doesn't have to hold back anymore. The real Willie exists somewhere between the two versions, closer to the horror version than anyone wants to admit. Homer's transformations in Halloween episodes reveal his true nature too. King Homer is a giant ape who destroys cities and terrorizes people. Homer as the devil shows him gleefully torturing souls and enjoying others' suffering. Homer possessed by evil spirits becomes a family-murdering monster. These aren't inversions of his character. They're amplifications of traits he already has. In regular episodes, Homer is selfish, violent toward Bart, negligent toward his family, and causes harm without caring about consequences. He just does it in sitcom-sized doses. Horror Homer takes those same traits and removes the constraints that keep them manageable. Same selfishness, same violence, same negligence, just expressed at a scale that reveals what those traits actually mean. Look at the patterns across all the Halloween episodes. The same characters become villains repeatedly. Burns is evil in both regular and horror episodes, just more overtly murderous in horror. Bart's pranks in regular episodes become genuinely destructive crimes in horror episodes. Marge's suppressed rage in normal life becomes homicidal fury in horror versions. These aren't alternate personalities. They're the truth underneath the comedy. The regular episodes have to maintain a certain level of likability and comedy, so the characters' worst traits get softened or played for laughs. The horror episodes don't have that constraint. They can show what these characters would actually be like if they followed their impulses without sitcom rules requiring reset buttons and happy endings. Think about how the horror episodes predict regular episode developments. Early Treehouse of Horror episodes showed Homer as dangerously incompetent around nuclear materials. Later, regular episodes confirmed the plant is contaminating Springfield and causing mutations. Horror episodes showed Maggie as more capable and aware than she appears. Regular episodes have increasingly suggested she's unusually intelligent for a baby. The aliens Kang and Cletus appear every year in Halloween episodes, and they're always trying to take over Earth or manipulate humans. What if they're actually present in Springfield year-round, just invisible in regular episodes? The Halloween specials might be the only time we see them, because those are the only episodes allowed to show reality without the comedy filter. When characters acknowledge they're in a Halloween episode and act differently because none of this counts, they're breaking the fourth wall in a way that regular episodes never do. But what if that awareness is actually them knowing the truth is about to come out? The disclaimer at the beginning of Halloween episodes isn't protecting viewers from scary content. It's protecting the show's reality from having to acknowledge these truths are canon. The fact that horror episodes often end with everyone dead or the world destroyed. Then the next week, everything is back to normal, mirrors how regular episodes reset after showing terrible things. Homer causes disasters, but next episode it's forgotten. Bart destroys relationships, but they're fine the next week. The Halloween episodes just make the reset more explicit instead of pretending continuity matters. Real Springfield exists somewhere in the middle. It's not as overtly violent as horror Springfield, but it's not as consequence-free as comedy Springfield either. The Halloween episodes are pulling back the curtain on what Springfield would look like if we saw the real psychological damage, the real violence, the real darkness that regular episodes have to sanitize for broadcast. The consistency of who becomes what in horror episodes isn't random. The writers understand these characters deeply enough to know what their darkest possible expressions would be, and those expressions align perfectly with traits visible in regular episodes. Willie's murders come from his rage. Homer's evil comes from his selfishness. Burns's villainy comes from his cruelty. Same source, different scale. The Treehouse of Horror episodes are the only times Springfield tells the truth about itself, and the non-canon disclaimer is just a way to deny what everyone already knows is real. The horror is the reality, and the regular episodes are the comfortable lie Springfield tells itself to keep functioning. Moving forward, we have the Grandpa Simpson forgotten wisdom theory. Grandpa Simpson seems like he's losing his mind, but what if his confusion is actually a coping mechanism to avoid remembering things too horrible to face? The Flying Hellfish episode reveals Grandpa's war history wasn't just service. It was violent, traumatic combat where he watched friends die and probably did terrible things himself. He and Burns served together, stole artwork, buried a fellow soldier, alive to protect treasure, and came home carrying psychological scars that never healed. That's serious PTSD material that Grandpa has been living with for over 50 years. His rambling stories that seem disconnected and crazy often contain kernels of truth that nobody bothers to verify. He talks about historical events he claims to have witnessed, and when anyone checks, they're real. He mentions knowing famous people, and evidence suggests he actually did meet them. His stories aren't false. They're trauma-distorted memories bleeding through his defensive confusion. Look at the pattern of when Grandpa suddenly becomes competent, when actual danger appears, or when someone he cares about needs him. The senility drops away, and he becomes sharp, focused, and capable. He's faking more confusion than he actually experiences, because being dismissed as senile is safer than being taken seriously. If people took his war stories seriously, they'd have to confront what he actually did and saw. If they listened to his warnings about danger, they'd have to acknowledge that his lifetime of experience actually means something. If they engaged with his memories of how Springfield used to be, they'd have to face how much the town has degraded. It's easier for everyone if Grandpa is just the crazy old man nobody has to listen to. The family dumps him in the retirement home not because he can't function, but because dealing with his needs is inconvenient. The few times Grandpa lives with the Simpsons, he's shown to be capable of cooking, cleaning, and caring for himself. He doesn't need institutional care. He needs family who values him. But Homer learned from Grandpa's own parenting mistakes that fathers are burdens to be avoided, so he treats Grandpa the same way Grandpa treated him. His moments of clarity are devastating when you actually listen. Grandpa talks about feeling useless, forgotten, waiting to die. He describes the retirement home as a place where society puts people it doesn't want to deal with anymore. He expresses awareness that his family would rather he just disappear. These aren't confused ramblings. These are lucid observations about his actual situation. When Grandpa tries to warn the family about dangers based on his experience, they ignore him until disaster proves he was right. He warns about scams. He recognizes patterns from history repeating. He sees problems coming based on decades of observation. But the family has trained themselves to tune him out, so they suffer consequences that could have been avoided if they'd just listened. The onion on the belt story that seems like poor nonsense is actually about how fashion and culture changed during the Depression. The specifics are weird, but the core is accurate historical memory about how people adapted to scarcity. Grandpa's mind is mixing up details while trying to communicate real experiences that nobody wants to hear about. His relationship with Jasper and the other retirement home residents shows he's capable of forming friendships and maintaining social connections. These men share experiences from wars, depressions, and historical events that shaped the modern world. They could be valuable sources of living history if anyone bothered to ask them real questions instead of dismissing them as senile. The conspiracy theory episode where Grandpa helps Bart investigate hidden history shows how sharp his mind can still be when engaged with something that matters. He remembers details from decades ago, makes logical connections, and contributes meaningfully to solving mysteries. He's not too old to think. He's just been conditioned to believe nobody wants to hear him think. The family treats Grandpa's rambling as senility because it's easier than acknowledging the traumatic wisdom he's trying to share. From decades of experience they refuse to understand. Up next, we've got the Ralph Wiggum savant theory. Ralph Wiggum seems like the dumbest kid in Springfield, but his bizarre statements and unique perspective might actually reveal an intelligence so advanced that it looks like stupidity to normal people. "I bent my Wookiee" is Ralph's most famous quote, and everyone treats it as nonsense. But Ralph says it while pointing at his action figure, which actually is bent. He's describing reality accurately using creative language that makes perfect sense if you understand his frame of reference. He's not wrong. He's just communicating in a way that reveals different cognitive processing. When Ralph gives Lisa the Valentine card with "I choose you," it's actually perfect communication. He's using language from his favorite train imagery to express genuine affection in a way that's personal and creative. The other kids mock it, but Ralph successfully communicated his feelings in a memorable way that Lisa clearly understood. That's not stupidity. That's emotional intelligence expressed through unique linguistic construction. His artistic work shows remarkable talent and vision. When Ralph draws or creates things, they're often surprisingly sophisticated and emotionally resonant. His perspective isn't limited or simple. It's just filtered through a consciousness that processes information differently than conventional thinkers. Look at the moments where Ralph makes statements that seem random but turn out to be prophetic or deeply insightful. He says, "The doctor said his nose would stop bleeding if he kept his finger out of there," which sounds dumb until you realize he's accurately diagnosing his own medical issue. He describes taste like colors and textures in ways that suggest synesthesia or an unusually vivid sensory experience of the world. When Ralph says he's in danger during the election episode, everyone dismisses it as paranoia. But he's actually picking up on genuine threats and social dynamics that other kids aren't noticing. His fear isn't irrational. He's sensing something wrong that he can't articulate in conventional terms. Chief Wiggum treats Ralph like he's disappointing, which suggests Ralph doesn't meet conventional measures of intelligence or achievement. But those measures are designed for specific types of thinking. Ralph operates outside those categories entirely. He might be failing tests while simultaneously understanding concepts that tests can't measure. The disconnect between how Ralph sees the world and how he's expected to express that understanding creates the appearance of stupidity. Imagine experiencing reality in complex, multi-dimensional ways, but only having simple language and social expectations to work with. You'd seem confused and disconnected too, not because you're dumb, but because you're trying to force rich experience into inadequate communicative frameworks. His classmates mock him, but Ralph doesn't seem to internalize their cruelty the way other kids would. He maintains his unique perspective and continues expressing himself authentically despite constant social punishment. That takes either profound stupidity or profound wisdom, and there's evidence suggesting it's the latter. When Ralph plays pretend, his imagination creates elaborate scenarios that show narrative sophistication and emotional depth. He's not just randomly putting ideas together. He's constructing complex stories with characters, motivations, and thematic elements that demonstrate advanced creative thinking. Lisa sees something in Ralph that others miss. She shows him genuine kindness and respect, which suggests she recognizes intelligence in him that conventional measures don't capture. Lisa is the smartest student at Springfield Elementary, so her positive assessment of Ralph matters more than the mockery from average students. The moments where Ralph demonstrates unexpected competence get dismissed as flukes or accidents. When he solves problems or shows skills that contradict his reputation, people rationalize it away rather than adjusting their understanding of his capabilities. This is how gifted children with unusual presentation styles get misidentified as disabled when they're actually operating on advanced cognitive levels. His relationship with language is particularly telling. Ralph uses words in creative ways that suggest deep understanding of linguistic flexibility rather than confusion about meaning. He treats language as a tool for experimentation rather than a rigid system of fixed definitions. That's how poets and philosophers use language, not how stupid people use it. Springfield's school system is designed for conventional learners who process information in standard ways. Ralph doesn't fit that template, so the system labels him as deficient rather than different. No one has tested him for savant abilities or explored whether his unique perspective represents advanced rather than impaired cognitive function. The really tragic part is that Ralph might be the smartest person in his classroom, but everyone, including his teachers, has decided he's the dumbest. They've created an identity for him based on his failure to conform to conventional measures, and that identity prevents them from recognizing his actual capabilities. Ralph doesn't think like other people because he's operating on a completely different level of consciousness, and Springfield's school system is too rigid to recognize their failing a potential genius. Now let's talk about the Superintendent Chalmers' suppressed violence theory. Superintendent Chalmers' legendary rage at Principal Skinner looks like comedy, but his level of anger and physical aggression suggests someone with serious anger management issues barely staying under control. Steamed hams is the most famous Chalmers moment, and everyone focuses on the absurdity of Skinner's lies. But watch Chalmers' reactions throughout that scene. He goes from zero to explosive anger multiple times. His face turns red, his voice gets loud, and he physically intimidates Skinner with his size and proximity. When he sees fire, and Skinner claims it's Aurora Borealis, Chalmers doesn't just express disbelief, he gets threatening in a way that suggests violence is right beneath the surface. His signature, "Skinner!" scream appears in dozens of episodes, and it's always accompanied by physical aggression. He grabs Skinner, shakes him, corners him against walls, invades his personal space in threatening ways. These aren't professional confrontations between a superintendent and principal. These are a large, angry man physically intimidating someone smaller and weaker. But here's the thing that makes this actually scary. Chalmers is a superintendent of schools, which means he's supposed to be a professional educational leader who models appropriate conflict resolution. Instead, he regularly loses control and becomes aggressive in front of students and staff. The fact that nobody reports this or tries to stop it suggests Springfield has normalized violent authority figures to a disturbing degree. His background explains some of the rage. Chalmers served in the military, which comes up occasionally when he mentions his past. Military service can create patterns of authoritarian thinking and aggressive responses to perceived disobedience or incompetence. Chalmers treats Skinner like a subordinate soldier who keeps failing rather than a professional colleague who deserves respect. Look at the times Chalmers has actually crossed physical boundaries. He's shoved Skinner, grabbed him forcefully, and gotten physically aggressive in ways that could constitute assault if Skinner ever chose to press charges. But Skinner has been conditioned through years of abuse from his mother and his own psychological issues to accept this treatment as normal. The pattern is always the same. Skinner does something that disappoints Chalmers or makes him look bad in front of important people. Chalmers' anger escalates immediately to shouting and physical intimidation. Skinner apologizes and makes excuses. Chalmers storms off without actually addressing the underlying problem. Nothing gets resolved, so the cycle repeats next time. What's disturbing is watching Chalmers' face during these confrontations. He gets a look of genuine rage that goes beyond professional frustration. His eyes bulge, his jaw clenches, his whole body tenses up like he's fighting the urge to actually hit Skinner. Each Skinner! Outburst is him using that verbal explosion to release enough pressure that he doesn't escalate to physical violence. Think about someone this angry managing an entire school district. How does he treat other principals when they disappoint him? How does he handle conflicts with teachers, parents, or school board members? If Skinner, who tries desperately to please him, gets this much rage, what happens to people who actually stand up to him or challenge his authority? His dietary choices reveal more about his rage management. Chalmers constantly mentions being hungry or looking forward to meals, which suggests he might be using food as a coping mechanism for stress and anger. The steamed hams incident happens because he's coming over for lunch, and his disappointment about the ruined roast leads to escalating anger. When his basic needs aren't met, his control slips. The really concerning part is that Chalmers seems completely unaware that his behavior is inappropriate. He's never shown feeling guilty about screaming at Skinner or being physically aggressive. He treats it as justified frustration with an incompetent employee rather than recognizing his own rage management failure. That lack of self-awareness makes him more dangerous because he has no internal checks on his behavior. His home life is barely explored, but the few glimpses we get suggest isolation and unhappiness. Chalmers doesn't seem to have close relationships or hobbies outside work. He's defined entirely by his job, which means all his stress and frustration has no outlet except exploding at subordinates. Every time Chalmers screams, "Skinner!" he's using that outburst as a release valve to stop himself from doing what his rage is actually telling him to do, which is cause genuine physical harm to someone who can't fight back. Remember to subscribe to our channel. Next up is the Comic Book Guy Prediction Power Theory. Comic Book Guy doesn't just reference pop culture, he seems to know he's in a TV show, and his famous insults might be him literally commenting on the Simpsons episodes he's in. Worst episode ever is comic book guy's signature phrase, and the first time he says it, he's talking about an episode of Itchy and Scratchy. But the timing is suspicious. He says it during episodes that fans actually criticized as being weaker entries in the series. It's like he's not commenting on the cartoon within the cartoon. He's commenting on the actual Simpsons episode he's currently appearing in. His meta-commentary appears constantly throughout the series. He references TV tropes, breaks the fourth wall with knowing looks, and makes observations about narrative structure that go beyond what a character should be aware of. When he talks about lazy writing or predictable plot developments, he's describing the actual show's writing, not just the fictional media he's supposedly critiquing. Look at his knowledge that seems impossible for a character to have. He knows about events happening in other characters' private moments. He references things that haven't been publicly revealed yet. He makes predictions about future developments that turn out to be accurate. Either he has supernatural surveillance abilities, or he's reading the scripts. The comic book shop itself might be a metaphor for his awareness. He's surrounded by fictional stories, catalogs them obsessively, and understands their structures intimately. He's basically a character who's studied how fictional narratives work so thoroughly that he's become aware he's in one. When comic book guy criticizes something as cliche or derivative, check whether the Simpsons episode he's in is actually using those same tired tropes. The correlation is disturbing. It's like the writers are using him to acknowledge their own creative shortcuts while doing nothing to fix them. His obesity and isolation make more sense if you think about them as consequences of his awareness. If you knew you were a fictional character whose entire existence was for other people's entertainment, why would you bother with health or relationships? Nothing you do actually matters. You're just performing for an audience that doesn't care about you as a person. The sarcasm that defines his personality could be his only defense against the existential horror of knowing he's not real. When everything is a performance and nothing has genuine consequences, sarcasm becomes a way to distance yourself from the absurdity of your own existence. His encyclopedic knowledge of science fiction and fantasy might be him recognizing kindred spirits, other fictional characters trapped in narratives they can't control. When he obsesses over Star Wars or Star Trek, he's not just being a nerd. He's studying other fictional universes to understand the rules of the one he's trapped in. Think about what it means to be aware you're fictional while everyone around you isn't. You can't tell them the truth because they're not capable of understanding. You're completely alone in your awareness, isolated by knowledge that makes real connection impossible. His failed romantic relationships make sense in this context. How do you form genuine attachment to someone when you know they're just as fictional as you are? When you know any relationship is just a plot device that will be reset or forgotten as soon as the episode ends? The few times comic book guy finds happiness or success, it gets taken away by the next episode. He marries someone, it doesn't last. He gets a girlfriend, the relationship ends. He achieves something meaningful, it's forgotten. He's experiencing the reality of being a supporting character in a long-running series where nothing permanently changes. His business surviving despite apparently having no customers is another clue to his awareness. The shop doesn't operate on real economics because nothing in Springfield does. It exists because the narrative needs a comic book shop, so it persists regardless of whether it makes financial sense. When comic book guy references worst episode ever, he's acknowledging the declining quality of the series he's trapped in. He's watching his world become less creative, more repetitive, more reliant on cheap callbacks instead of genuine storytelling, and he's powerless to do anything except comment sarcastically from the sidelines. Comic book. Guy's loneliness isn't just about being a nerd, it's about being the only person in Springfield who knows nothing is real, and that knowledge has isolated him from ever forming genuine connections with anyone. Now let's talk about the itchy and scratchy propaganda theory. Itchy and scratchy seems like a parody of violent cartoons, but the show within a show might be revealing how media violence systematically desensitizes entire populations to brutality. The violence in Itchy and Scratchy isn't just extreme. It's sadistic, creative, and presented as entertainment for young children. Every episode shows Scratchy being tortured, dismembered, exploded, crushed, burned, and killed in increasingly elaborate ways. The cat suffers horribly while the mouse derives obvious pleasure from causing that suffering. And children laugh. Watch the kids' reactions carefully. They don't show shock or concern when Scratchy gets his organs ripped out or his head cut off. They laugh, cheer, and ask for more. The violence has become so normalized in their media consumption that actual torture and murder register as comedy. That's not innocent childhood enthusiasm. That's systematic desensitization that's rewired how they process violence. The show has been running for generations in Springfield. Marge and Homer watched Itchy and Scratchy as kids. Now their children watch it. The propaganda isn't just affecting one generation. It's multi-generational programming that's taught Springfield's population that violence is entertainment, suffering is funny, and sadism is acceptable as long as it's animated. Look at what happens when the show tries to become less violent. The Poochie episode introduces a new character meant to make the show more positive and less focused on pure violence. Kids immediately reject it. They don't want creative storytelling or positive messages. They want to see Scratchy suffer. The network gives them what they want because that's what the programming has conditioned them to demand. The corporate control behind Itchy and Scratchy is barely hidden. Multiple episodes show network executives making cynical decisions about content based purely on ratings and profit. They know the violence is affecting children. They just don't care because violent content performs better. The propaganda isn't accidental. It's a deliberate business strategy. When Marge campaigns against cartoon violence, she's initially successful at getting the show censored. But then she undermines her own position by defending Michelangelo's David against censorship. The show uses her inconsistency to discredit the entire anti-violence movement, teaching kids and parents that anyone who opposes media violence is a hypocrite who can be safely ignored. Think about what Springfield would look like if generations of children weren't raised on extreme violence as entertainment. Would Bart be as casually cruel? Would Homer strangle his son regularly? Would the town form violent mobs so easily? The media they consume has shaped the culture in ways nobody wants to acknowledge. The animation style itself is revealing. Itchy and Scratchy is deliberately crude and simplistic, which creates emotional distance between viewers and the violence. The characters aren't realistic enough to trigger empathy, so kids can watch horrific violence without processing it as something that could happen to real beings. That's sophisticated psychological manipulation designed to bypass natural emotional responses to suffering. International versions of the show get referenced occasionally, and they're all similarly violent. This isn't just Springfield being weird. This is a global phenomenon of children's entertainment that normalizes violence across entire populations. Whatever corporation produces Itchy and Scratchy is running a worldwide operation. The merchandise extends the violence programming beyond screen time. Kids have Itchy and Scratchy toys where they can physically act out the violence they've watched. They wear clothing with violent imagery. They're surrounded by constant reinforcement that violence is normal, funny, and acceptable. The media consumption bleeds into their entire environment. Adults in Springfield don't question the appropriateness of the content because they were raised on the same programming. Homer and Marge both watched ultra-violent cartoons as children, so they see nothing wrong with their kids consuming the same content. Each generation passes the desensitization to the next, creating a population that's progressively less sensitive to violence and suffering. The few episodes that show Itchy and Scratchy's production reveal a cynical operation where writers and animators create violence purely for profit without any consideration of social impact. They're explicitly aware that their content affects children. They joke about it in production meetings. They just don't care because the money keeps coming. When Lisa tries to improve the show by writing a script with actual story and less violence, the network executives dismiss her efforts. They explain that audiences have been conditioned to expect certain content, and deviating from that formula would hurt ratings. The system has created its own feedback loop where violence breeds demand for more violence. Springfield's children grow up thinking cartoon murder is hilarious because they've been conditioned by thousands of hours of programming that normalized violence before they could develop critical thinking skills about what they were watching. Moving forward, we have the Springfield mob mentality theory. Springfield doesn't just have quirky citizens, it displays actual symptoms of collective psychosis, where the entire population can shift beliefs, form violent mobs, or create mass delusions at a moment's notice. The Bear Patrol episode shows the pattern perfectly. One bear wanders through town, and within hours the entire population is demanding government action against a bear epidemic that doesn't exist. They elect Homer as Bear Patrol chief despite him having zero qualifications. They accept massive tax increases without question. Then when Lisa points out they haven't seen any bears because the patrol works, Homer credits a rock for keeping tigers away. The entire town instantly believes in tiger-repelling rocks, mass delusion spreading at the speed of conversation. Watch how quickly Springfield forms mobs. Someone makes an accusation, and within minutes hundreds of people are marching with torches and weapons toward whoever was accused. They don't investigate, they don't verify information, they don't even seem to think individually. The mob forms like a single organism responding to stimulus, and individuals get absorbed into the collective mindset immediately. The Monorail episode shows even more disturbing group psychology. A conman shows up, performs one musical number, and the entire town votes to spend their entire budget on a monorail despite having no transportation infrastructure problems. They ignore expert warnings from Marge. They dismiss evidence that the salesman is a fraud. They collectively decide to make a terrible decision, and nothing can stop them once the hive mind activates. Look at how beliefs spread through Springfield. One person makes a claim, and within hours everyone knows about it and has incorporated it into their worldview. There's no period of skepticism or verification. Information moves through the population like a virus, and everyone gets infected simultaneously. When the information turns out to be false, they all shift to a new belief just as quickly, without questioning why they believed the false thing. The town's relationship with the church shows collective psychology too. They all attend services together, listen to Reverend Lovejoy's sermons, and share religious beliefs that shift based on whatever the current narrative needs. But their faith doesn't seem deeply held or personal. It's more like social performance, where everyone agrees to believe certain things because that's what the group does. Political beliefs flip just as easily. The town elects different mayors, supports different policies, and changes ideological positions based on whoever gives the most convincing speech most recently. There's no consistency or principle, just collective reaction to whoever captured their attention most effectively. Panic spreads through Springfield faster than actual threats. Someone yells about danger, and the entire population immediately evacuates, riots, or huddles together in terror without verifying whether the danger is real. The collective nervous system is so sensitive that any stimulus triggers town-wide fight-or-flight response. Think about what kind of psychology creates this behavior. Individual Springfield residents aren't all stupid or crazy. Many of them show capacity for rational thought when alone. But put them in groups and they lose individual identity completely. The collective takes over and individual judgment disappears. The town meetings reveal the mechanism. Someone stands up and makes an emotional appeal. The crowd responds with cheering or booing. That reaction reinforces itself as people look around and join whatever emotion the group is expressing. Within seconds, everyone is united in the same feeling without any individual processing of information. Compare Springfield to other towns in the series. When the Simpsons visit other places, the populations there seem more stable and less prone to mass hysteria. Springfield is unique in how easily the collective psychology overtakes individual thinking. Something about the town specifically has created this vulnerability to groupthink. The environmental factors might contribute. Nuclear plant contamination could be affecting brain chemistry town-wide. Decades of poor education at Springfield Elementary has created a population without critical thinking skills. The constant media consumption has trained people to respond emotionally rather than analytically. All these factors combine to create perfect conditions for collective psychosis. The speed of opinion change is the most telling symptom. Normal communities take time to shift beliefs or form new consensus. Springfield can completely reverse its collective position in minutes. They love someone, then hate them, then love them again, based purely on what happened most recently. There's no memory or consistency. When celebrities or authority figures visit Springfield, the entire town immediately treats them as the most important thing happening. They drop everything to obsess over the visitor. Their normal lives pause while the collective focuses on the new stimulus. Once the celebrity leaves, they forget it ever happened and return to previous patterns. The lynching instinct is always barely below the surface. Multiple episodes show the town forming lynch mobs, ready to execute people based on accusations that haven't been proven. They're always one angry speech away from collective violence. The social contract that prevents mob justice in normal communities barely exists in Springfield. Look at major events in Springfield's history. The town has been nearly destroyed multiple times by their own collective bad decisions. They've been scammed repeatedly by obvious frauds. They've rioted over minor inconveniences. They've made catastrophically stupid policy choices. And they never learn because the collective has no memory or capacity for reflection. The cult vulnerability is extreme. Whenever anyone starts a movement, religion, or organization in Springfield, people join immediately in large numbers. The town is one charismatic leader away from complete cult takeover at any given moment. They're desperate for something to believe in collectively and will accept almost any belief system that's presented convincingly. What makes this genuinely terrifying is that individual residents seem unaware this is happening. When interviewed or talking alone, they express individual opinions and personalities. But the moment they're in groups, those individuals disappear, and the collective consciousness takes over. They don't notice the switch because they're not self-aware enough to recognize when they've lost individual agency. Springfield isn't a town with a strong community spirit. It's a population with such weak individual identity that mass hysteria can overtake rational thought within minutes, making everyone equally dangerous when the hive mind activates. Up next, we've got the Lenny and Carl secret agents theory. Lenny and Carl seem like Homer's harmless work friends, but their mysterious backgrounds, unusual knowledge, and perfect timing suggest they're actually operatives assigned to surveillance duty. Their backstories contradict themselves constantly across episodes. Sometimes Lenny is from Springfield, sometimes from somewhere else entirely. Carl's education and background change depending on the episode. Normal people have consistent histories. People with cover stories have histories that shift when they forget what they said previously. Look at their unexplained competence in areas that nuclear plant workers shouldn't know about. They demonstrate knowledge of advanced technology, international affairs, and specialized skills that don't match their job descriptions. When crisis situations arise, they sometimes show tactical thinking or capabilities that suggest professional training beyond what civilian workers would have. The financial inconsistency is suspicious. Lenny and Carl work the same job as Homer at the same pay grade, but they occasionally display wealth or access to resources that don't match their supposed income. They take expensive vacations, own nice things, and seem financially stable in ways that contradict what nuclear plant workers in Springfield should be able to afford. Their friendship with Homer is convenient for surveillance purposes. They're always around him, always know where he is, always present at important moments. They've positioned themselves as his closest friends at work, which gives them perfect access to monitor everything he does. Homer trusts them completely, which means he shares information and acts naturally around them without suspecting he's being watched. Think about the nuclear plant's strategic importance. It's the primary power source for the entire region, and it's run by an incompetent, possibly criminal owner with no oversight. The government would absolutely have agents monitoring that facility. Lenny and Carl's positions give them access to the plant's operations, Burns's activities, and the most negligent worker in the facility who causes regular safety violations. Their reaction times are too perfect. Whenever Homer is about to do something catastrophically stupid, they're in position to witness it. When dangerous situations develop, they're already there. The timing suggests they're not just randomly present. They're strategically positioned based on intelligence about where problems are likely to occur. Look at how they guide Homer's behavior. They don't give direct orders, but they make suggestions, ask leading questions, and steer conversations in ways that influence Homer's decisions. That's exactly how handlers manage assets without making the surveillance obvious. Homer thinks his friends are just giving advice, but they're actually managing his behavior. The episodes where one of them is absent are revealing. When only Lenny or Carl is around, the remaining one acts slightly differently, showing more vigilance and awareness. They work as a team where both being present allows them to maintain their cover more effectively. One missing creates pressure on the other to do solo surveillance while maintaining the fiction of just being Homer's buddy. Their knowledge of Homer's schedule and routines goes beyond normal friendship. They know when he'll be at Moe's, where he goes after work, what he does on weekends. That level of detailed knowledge about someone's patterns suggests they're tracking him systematically, not just coincidentally running into him. The classified information they occasionally reference doesn't make sense for their supposed backgrounds. Carl mentions things about international politics or government operations that average citizens wouldn't know. Lenny demonstrates technical knowledge that exceeds what his education should provide. They occasionally slip and reveal they know things they shouldn't. Their emergency responses are too trained. When actual crises happen at the plant, they react with a level of calm and tactical thinking that suggests professional preparation. Normal workers panic or freeze. Trained operatives follow protocols and execute planned responses. Lenny and Carl consistently show the latter. The government's interest in Homer makes sense given his access and influence. Homer works at a nuclear facility, knows burns personally, causes regular incidents that could expose plant violations, and somehow survives situations that should kill him. Those factors make him someone worth monitoring continuously. Lenny and Carl are the perfect cover for that monitoring. Homer thinks Lenny and Carl are his best friends, but they're actually his assigned handlers, making sure the most dangerous person at the nuclear plant stays monitored and controlled. Now let's talk about the Professor Frink ignored warnings theory. Professor Frink is Springfield's smartest scientist, but he's trapped in a nightmare where he can see every disaster coming, warn everyone clearly, and then watch helplessly as they ignore him until it's too late. The pattern repeats in virtually every episode Frink appears in. He invents something that could solve a problem or prevent a disaster. He explains the science clearly. He demonstrates that it works. Then Springfield ignores him. The disaster happens exactly as he predicted, and only after people suffer do they acknowledge he was right. By then it's too late to prevent the damage. His inventions are consistently ahead of their time and actually functional. Unlike other Springfield scientists who create absurd machines that shouldn't work, Frink's technology is based on sound scientific principles and achieves what it's designed to do. He's a legitimate genius creating real solutions. The problem isn't his competence, it's Springfield's complete disinterest in listening to smart people. Look at how people react when Frink tries to warn them. They mock his voice, make fun of his mannerisms, tune out when he starts explaining scientific concepts, and dismiss his warnings as nerdy overreaction. The anti-intellectualism in Springfield has created a culture where being smart is seen as a character flaw rather than an asset. When disasters occur that Frink predicted, nobody apologizes or acknowledges their mistake in ignoring him. They just deal with the crisis and move on without learning anything. The cycle repeats because Springfield refuses to connect cause and effect. Frink said X would happen, they ignored him. X happened, but they still don't start listening to him next time. His relationship with the scientific community shows he's respected by actual experts. When Frink presents at conferences or publishes research, other scientists take him seriously. The problem is purely Springfield's refusal to value expertise. In any other town, Frink would be a valuable resource. In Springfield, he's treated like an eccentric nobody should listen to. The psychological toll on Frink is visible. Early episodes show him enthusiastic and eager to help. Later episodes show increasing frustration and resignation. He's watching people suffer from preventable disasters while knowing he could have prevented them if anyone had listened. That creates a specific kind of trauma. Helplessly witnessing harm, you had the knowledge and ability to prevent it. Think about what it means to be the smartest person in a town that punishes intelligence. Frink can see problems coming that others can't perceive. He understands consequences that others can't predict. He knows solutions that others won't implement. All of his superior knowledge becomes useless because the population he's trying to help actively rejects expert guidance. His inventions that could improve Springfield's quality of life sit unused or get destroyed because nobody values them. He's created technology that could solve infrastructure problems, prevent environmental disasters, and save lives. All of it gets ignored because Springfield would rather stumble through crises than accept help from someone they consider weird. The really tragic episodes are when Frink's warnings would have prevented deaths or serious injuries. People get hurt or killed in accidents that Frink specifically warned about. He has to live with knowing that if Springfield had listened to him, those people would still be alive and healthy. That guilt isn't his fault, but he carries it anyway. When Frink does get credit for something, it's always after the disaster. They retrofit his solution to fix the problem rather than preventing it in the first place. He gets brief recognition for solving a crisis, then they go back to ignoring him until the next preventable catastrophe. The pattern teaches him that his value to Springfield is in cleaning up messes they created by not listening to him. His increasing use of the phrase with the glavin and similar verbal tics might be psychological coping mechanisms. When you spend your life being ignored and dismissed, you might develop speech patterns that let you express frustration without directly confronting the people who refuse to listen. His verbal quirks could be manifestations of suppressed rage at Springfield's willful stupidity. Look at how the town treats other intelligent people. Lisa is isolated and mocked. Comic book guy is dismissed as a joke. Anyone who demonstrates above-average intelligence gets socially punished. Springfield has created a culture where being smart makes you a target, which means Frink's expertise actively works against him socially. The few times Springfield does listen to Frink, it's because a disaster is currently happening and they're desperate. They only value his knowledge when they're actively suffering. The second the crisis passes, they go back to dismissing him. He's useful as emergency response but not worth listening to for prevention. His father appears in one episode and shows similar patterns. Brilliant scientist whose inventions could have helped people but got ignored or exploited. This suggests the Frink family has been dealing with Springfield's anti-intellectualism for generations. It's not just John Frink being dismissed. It's a systematic pattern of the town rejecting smart people. What makes this genuinely heartbreaking is that Frink keeps trying. Despite decades of being ignored, he still invents solutions, still offers warnings, still tries to help people who refuse to be helped. He hasn't given up on Springfield, even though Springfield gave up on him years ago. Frink will spend his entire life being right about dangers, being ignored, watching preventable disasters happen, and then being briefly thanked before the cycle repeats, because Springfield would rather suffer than admit smart people know better. Next up is the Otto man's hidden trauma theory. Otto man seems like a harmless aging stoner, but his commitment to staying perpetually young and his protective behavior toward the kids suggests someone using adolescence as armor against traumatic memories. The episode revealing Otto's background shows he comes from a wealthy family with high expectations. His parents wanted him to be successful, professional, and conventional. Otto rejected all of that to become a school bus driver who lives on the edge of poverty. That's not rebellion. That's someone who found safety in choosing the opposite of what his family wanted for him. His estrangement from his family gets referenced occasionally but never fully explained. Something happened that made Otto choose complete separation over maintaining any relationship with his parents. People don't usually cut off rich families who could provide financial support unless staying connected means enduring something worse than poverty. Look at how protective Otto is of the kids on his bus. When they're in danger, he becomes genuinely heroic, risking his own safety to protect them. When they're being bullied or threatened, Otto intervenes with an intensity that goes beyond professional duty. He's not just driving a bus, he's protecting children in ways that suggest he wishes someone had protected him when he was their age. His living situation is deliberately unstable. Otto sometimes lives in the bus, sometimes crashes with friends, sometimes stays in terrible apartments. Someone with his family's wealth could demand money and live comfortably. But he maintains poverty and instability like he's punishing himself or hiding from something. The stoner personality serves multiple functions. Being high all the time provides emotional numbing that makes it easier to avoid processing trauma. It creates a persona of laid-back harmlessness that keeps people from asking deeper questions about his past. It gives him an excuse for memory problems if anyone notices he dodges questions about his history. Think about why someone would choose to drive a school bus as their career. It's not prestigious, the pay is terrible, and dealing with kids all day is exhausting, but it puts Otto in position to be the adult he needed when he was young. Every time he protects a kid or stands up for them against authority, he's trying to save his younger self. His moments of unexpected wisdom reveal someone smarter and more self-aware than the stoner persona suggests. When Otto gives advice or shares insights, they're often surprisingly deep and show real understanding of psychology and human nature. He's not actually dumb. He's deliberately playing dumb to avoid expectations and responsibilities. The musical references and rock and roll lifestyle Otto maintains are arrested development markers. He's frozen himself at the age when he felt safest or happiest, refusing to move past that developmental stage because growing up means confronting whatever trauma he's avoiding. His relationship with Superintendent Chalmers is telling. Chalmers constantly threatens to fire Otto, but never actually does. Maybe because Chalmers recognizes that Otto is unusually dedicated to protecting kids, even if his methods are unconventional. Or maybe because Chalmers suspects there's something darker in Otto's past, and firing him would be cruel. Look at how Otto responds to threats against children specifically. His anger and protective instincts activate immediately in ways that seem disproportionate to the situation. That hypervigilance around child safety suggests someone whose trauma involved childhood vulnerability or harm. When Otto talks about his brief teaching career or other failed attempts at conventional employment, he frames them as funny stories about not fitting into normal society. But underneath the humor is someone who's tried to have a conventional life and found it unbearable because it triggered too many memories or expectations associated with his family trauma. His refusal to grow up isn't laziness or immaturity. It's a survival strategy. Staying in eternal adolescence means he doesn't have to become the kind of adult his family wanted him to be. It means he can maintain emotional distance from the responsibilities and relationships that might force him to confront his past. Otto refuses to grow up because his childhood was so painful that staying in eternal adolescence is the only way he can feel safe, and protecting Springfield's children is his way of saving the kid he used to be. But before we get into the next theory, subscribe to our channel. Now let's talk about the Patty and Selma's misery addiction theory. Patty and Selma Bouvier seem like they're just negative people, but their relationship is actually a toxic, codependent pact where they have agreed to keep each other trapped in mutual misery forever. Watch how they interact when one of them has an opportunity for happiness. When Selma gets a potential boyfriend, Patty subtly undermines the relationship. When Patty shows interest in someone, Selma finds ways to sabotage it. They don't do this openly or maliciously. They do it through passive-aggressive comments, inconvenient timing, and manufacturing reasons the relationship won't work. The pattern is consistent across every romantic opportunity either sister has. They claim to support each other in finding partners, but their actions constantly prevent either one from actually succeeding in romance. It's like they've made an unspoken agreement that neither one is allowed to escape their shared misery through a successful relationship. Their identical life choices aren't coincidence. They live together, work at the same DMV, share the same hobbies, have the same cynical worldview, and maintain the same bitter attitude toward life. That level of synchronization isn't natural. It's enforced through mutual pressure to stay aligned. Any deviation from the shared misery threatens the codependent bond. Look at how they treat Marge, their sister who escaped through marriage. They're constantly critical of Homer, dismissive of Marge's choices, and seem resentful that Marge has a family while they remain alone. But they also sabotage Marge's attempts to help them find partners or improve their lives. They want to punish Marge for escaping while simultaneously refusing to take the same escape routes Marge offers them. Their work at the DMV shows how they've weaponized their shared misery. They make everyone who comes through the DMV as miserable as they are. They take pleasure in denying applications, failing people on tests, and generally making the bureaucratic process as painful as possible. It's like they need to spread their misery to feel validated in their own unhappiness. The smoking addiction they share serves multiple purposes. It gives them something to bond over. It slowly kills them, which fits with their general life-negative attitude. It makes them less attractive to potential partners, which helps maintain their single status. It's a shared form of self-harm they perform together constantly. Think about the competition between them. They compete over who has the worst day, who encountered more rudeness, who has more reasons to be bitter. They're not trying to outdo each other in happiness. They're competing in misery. Whoever is more miserable wins the competition, which creates incentive to maintain or worsen their negative circumstances. When Selma briefly marries Sideshow Bob or has other relationship moments, Patty's immediate response is barely concealed jealousy and increased pressure for Selma to end the relationship. She can't stand being the only miserable one. The codependency requires both sisters to be equally unhappy at all times. Their treatment of men reveals the sabotage pattern clearly. Any man who shows interest in either sister gets subjected to harsh criticism, impossible standards, and coordinated pressure from both sisters designed to drive him away. They say they want relationships, but their behavior ensures no man could tolerate being around them long enough to form one. The obsession with MacGyver and other unattainable men makes sense in this context. Crushing on fictional characters or celebrities means they can claim to have romantic interests without any risk of actual relationships forming. It's safe, unrequited love that maintains their victim status while preventing real connection. Their relationship with each other is the only stable, long-term bond either has maintained. They've invested decades into this codependent partnership. Leaving it would mean admitting they wasted their entire adult lives in a toxic relationship with their own sister. The sunk cost is too high, so they double down on the misery rather than escaping. Look at the few times one sister tries to improve her situation. The other immediately creates a crisis that requires attention, distracts from the improvement effort, or manufactures drama that pulls the sister attempting escape back into the codependent dynamic. They've developed sophisticated systems for keeping each other trapped. Their shared smoking breaks, their synchronized lunch hours, their identical schedules. All of this creates constant contact that prevents either one from developing independent identity or pursuing individual goals. The codependency requires constant maintenance through regular interaction and mutual reinforcement of negative patterns. What makes this really dark is that both sisters are aware on some level that they're trapped. They occasionally express awareness that their lives are empty and unfulfilling, but instead of taking action to change, they recommit to the shared misery because being alone in their unhappiness would be worse than being miserable together. The targeting of Homer and Marge's relationship shows displaced aggression. They can't direct their rage at each other because that would break the codependent pact. So they redirect it toward Marge's marriage, trying to poison it just enough to bring Marge down to their level without fully destroying it, which would actually make Marge available to demand more emotional support from them. Patty and Selma have imprisoned each other in shared misery because they're both too afraid of being abandoned to let either one actually try to be happy, so they've made suffering their bond and trapped themselves forever. Moving forward, we have the Kent Brockman fascist revelation theory. Kent Brockman immediately offered to enslave humanity to alien overlords, and while everyone treats it as a joke, it revealed his true nature as someone who's always been waiting for dictatorship so he can serve power. The Alien Ant episode shows Brockman's instant reaction when he thinks powerful beings have taken control. He doesn't resist, doesn't question, doesn't express concern for human freedom. His immediate response is, I, for one, welcome our new insect overlords, and he immediately offers to help them enslave humanity by using his media platform as propaganda. That's not panic or fear. That's someone revealing their actual political instincts. But here's what makes this genuinely disturbing. Brockman wasn't being coerced or threatened. The ants hadn't actually taken over yet. He saw what he thought was overwhelming power and immediately rushed to align himself with it before anyone forced him to. He's not a collaborator under duress. He's an eager volunteer for authoritarianism. Look at his journalism throughout the series. Brockman doesn't report news. He shapes narratives to serve whoever he thinks has power at any given moment. When the mayor is strong, Brockman supports him. When business interests need good press, Brockman provides it. When public opinion shifts, Brockman shifts with it. He has no principles or commitment to truth, just pure opportunism and service to power. His role in Springfield gives him influence over public opinion. As the primary news anchor, he controls what information most citizens receive and how they interpret events. He's the perfect position for someone who wants to serve authoritarian power, because he can use media to manufacture consent and suppress dissent. The alien pledge isn't an isolated incident. Multiple episodes show Brockman immediately siding with whoever demonstrates force or authority. When mobs form, he joins them. When the rich and powerful need defending, he defends them. When the weak need protecting, he ignores them. His moral compass points toward power at all times. Think about what kind of person spends their career in journalism waiting for the opportunity to become a propaganda minister. Brockman didn't accidentally end up in media. He chose a profession that would give him influence over public opinion, and he's been using that influence to serve power his entire career. His treatment of Homer and other regular Springfield residents shows his contempt for common people. When covering stories about working-class struggles, Brockman is dismissive and mocking. When interviewing powerful people, he's deferential and flattering. He's already operating like state media that serves elite interests over public good. The network he works for enables this behavior. They don't expect objectivity or truth from Brockman. They expect him to deliver stories that serve the network's interests and maintain the status quo. He's not corrupt despite being a journalist. He's corrupt in exactly the way his employers want him to be. Look at how Brockman covers political events. He never challenges authority figures or asks difficult questions. He accepts official narratives without investigation. He uses his platform to marginalize dissenting voices and legitimize whoever currently holds power. That's not lazy journalism. That's deliberate service to authoritarianism. When actual injustices occur in Springfield, Brockman either ignores them or frames them in ways that protect powerful interests. Burns's environmental crimes get minimal coverage. Police brutality gets justified. Corruption gets excused. Brockman's journalism actively prevents accountability for the powerful. His readiness to pledge loyalty to insect overlords reveals that he doesn't care who holds power as long as he can serve them. Democracy, dictatorship, alien occupation, it's all the same to Brockman as long as he maintains his position as official mouthpiece for whoever's in charge. The really scary part is how effective he is at manufacturing consent. When Brockman tells Springfield how to think about an issue, they generally accept his framing without question. He's cultivated trust while systematically using that trust to serve interests that don't benefit his audience. His occasional moments of seeming integrity are strategic. When Brockman appears to challenge power, it's always safe criticism that doesn't threaten real change. He provides just enough appearance of journalism to maintain credibility while never actually holding anyone accountable. Think about how quickly he pivoted from human to insect loyalist. No hesitation, no moral conflict, no consideration of what he was offering to do. That instant switch reveals someone who has no loyalty to humanity, democracy, or freedom, only to power itself. Other journalists in the Simpsons universe sometimes show actual integrity. The foreign correspondents ask tough questions. Investigative reporters occasionally expose corruption. But Brockman occupies the most visible position and uses it purely for opportunism and service to authority. The alien moment was him dropping his mask for a second and revealing what he's always been waiting for. He wants authoritarianism because it would formalize and protect the power-serving role he's already performing. He's been softening Springfield for authoritarian takeover through years of propaganda disguised as journalism. Brockman isn't incompetent or cowardly. He's been deliberately using his platform to soften Springfield for authoritarian takeover, and his alien pledge was just him dropping the mask for a moment. Up next, we've got the Dr. Hibbert's malpractice cover-up theory. Dr. Hibbert laughs at everything, including his patient's suffering, but that laughter might be his brain's only defense against acknowledging how many people he's accidentally killed through medical incompetence. The most disturbing thing about Dr. Hibbert is his signature laugh. He laughs when delivering terrible diagnoses. He laughs when describing painful procedures. He laughs when patients express fear or distress. Normal doctors show empathy. Hibbert responds to human suffering with laughter that gets more pronounced the worse the medical situation becomes. Look at the actual medical care he provides throughout the series. He's misdiagnosed patients repeatedly, performed procedures he wasn't qualified for, made serious medication errors, and violated basic medical ethics regularly. When these mistakes get pointed out, he just laughs and moves on without acknowledging the harm he caused. The episode where he tells Mr. Burns about his Three Stooges syndrome shows Hibbert's approach to medicine. He doesn't actually understand what's keeping Burns alive. He uses a comedy reference to explain complex medical interactions that he can't properly diagnose. His whole explanation is delivered while laughing about a patient who should be dead. That's not medical professionalism. That's someone using humor to cover incompetence. Think about how many patients Hibbert has treated over the years in Springfield. He's the primary physician for the entire town. Every time someone gets sick or injured, they see Dr. Hibbert. If his incompetence and ethical violations are this visible in episodes we see, imagine the full scope of malpractice happening off-screen. His laughter increases in situations where he should be most serious. When delivering terminal diagnoses, when discussing risky procedures, when admitting he made a mistake, the laugh gets louder and longer. It's like his nervous system has rewired itself to produce laughter as a defense mechanism against acknowledging the weight of his medical failures. Look at his relationship with pharmaceutical companies. Multiple episodes show Hibbert accepting bribes, gifts, and perks from drug companies in exchange for prescribing specific medications. He's not making medical decisions based on patient welfare. He's prescribing whatever earns him the best kickbacks. That's systematic corruption that's harming patients for profit. The fact that he's still licensed despite obvious malpractice suggests either Springfield's medical board is incompetent or Hibbert has enough political connections to avoid accountability. He operates with impunity because he knows the system won't stop him. His treatment of Homer specifically shows the pattern. Homer has been poisoned, injured, and subjected to medical emergencies dozens of times. Hibbert treats these situations with inappropriate laughter and often provides inadequate care. Homer survives through his own biological impossibility, not because Hibbert provides good treatment. When Hibbert tells Homer about the crayon in his brain, he laughs while explaining that Homer's been brain damaged since childhood. He's telling a patient their entire life has been affected by undiagnosed medical condition, and he's laughing about it. That's not bedside manner failure. That's psychological detachment from the reality of patient suffering. Think about the liability he's accumulated. The misdiagnoses alone should have resulted in malpractice suits. The medication errors should have cost him his license. The ethical violations should have gotten him investigated. But he just keeps practicing medicine and laughing his way through each new disaster. His moments of competence make the incompetence worse. Occasionally, Hibbert demonstrates that he actually knows proper medical procedures and could provide good care if he wanted to. But most of the time, he cuts corners, makes assumptions, and provides care that barely meets minimal standards. He's choosing incompetence because it's easier and more profitable than practicing medicine properly. The laughter might be covering massive guilt. If Hibbert has even minimal self-awareness, he knows people have died or been permanently harmed by his medical mistakes. That knowledge would create unbearable psychological burden. The constant laughter could be his mind's attempt to avoid confronting the human cost of his career. Look at how he responds when patients question his judgment or ask for second opinions. He laughs and dismisses their concerns without addressing the medical issues they're raising. He uses his authority as a doctor and his jovial persona to shut down legitimate questions that might expose his incompetence. His affluent lifestyle doesn't match honest medical practice in a town like Springfield. He lives in a mansion, takes expensive vacations, and displays wealth that suggests income beyond what a small-town doctor should earn. Either he's involved in serious medical fraud, or his pharmaceutical company kickbacks are substantial enough to fund a luxury lifestyle. The fact that Springfield keeps using him, despite alternatives being available, shows how his friendly persona masks the danger he represents. People like Dr. Hibbert because he seems nice and makes them laugh. They don't connect his laughter to the fact that he's provided them terrible medical care, because the laughter creates emotional distance from the actual malpractice. When he admits to medical errors, he frames them as funny accidents rather than serious professional failures. He laughs about mixing up test results, giving people wrong medications, or performing procedures incorrectly. Each laugh is him avoiding accountability for harm that destroyed people's lives or health. The really dark possibility is that some of his laughter is genuine. Maybe years of malpractice have desensitized him to patient suffering to the point where he actually finds medical disasters funny. The psychological defense mechanism has become his actual personality. Every time Dr. Hibbert laughs at something horrific, he's keeping himself from facing the guilt of knowing how many people he's failed, because admitting it would destroy the persona he's built and force him to confront decades of medical negligence that's harmed his entire community. Now let's talk about the Springfield Elementary's child endangerment system theory. Springfield Elementary seems like a struggling school, but the level of danger, neglect, and deliberate sabotage suggests something darker than budget cuts. This might be intentional population management. The physical building itself violates every safety code that exists. The gym class uses mats filled with asbestos. The cafeteria serves food contaminated with disease and possibly toxic materials. The ventilation system doesn't work, leaving students breathing unsafe air. The wiring is exposed and dangerous, or structural problems threaten collapse. This isn't deferred maintenance. This is systematic failure to provide safe environment for hundreds of children. Look at how often students face life-threatening situations during normal school activities. They're sent outside in dangerous weather. They're exposed to toxic substance in science class. They participate in gym activities that result in serious injuries. Field trips consistently put children in genuinely dangerous situations. The death rate would be significant if not for cartoon physics protecting them. Principal Skinner runs the school with military precision, which means he's organized and capable. He chooses to maintain these dangerous conditions despite having the administrative skills to fix them. Superintendent Chalmers inspects the school regularly and sees the hazards but doesn't shut it down. The adults in charge are knowingly allowing children to attend an unsafe facility. The staff's response to danger shows this isn't accidental neglect. When students get hurt, staff members often seem unsurprised or unconcerned. When hazards get pointed out, they make excuses rather than fixing problems. When parents complain, they deflect rather than addressing safety issues. This is coordinated institutional indifference to child welfare. Think about the psychological damage being done systematically. Students are taught that authority figures don't care about their safety. They learn that institutions can't be trusted to protect them. They internalize that their well-being doesn't matter to the adults supposedly responsible for them. This creates generations of citizens conditioned to accept institutional failure and not expect better. Willie's presence as groundskeeper makes the safety violations worse. He's a violent, unstable person, given unsupervised access to children and dangerous equipment. Any proper school would never hire him. Springfield Elementary not only employs him, but gives him keys to the building and minimal oversight. That's not an oversight. That's deliberately placing a dangerous person in contact with vulnerable children. The cafeteria deserves special attention. Lunch Lady Doris serves food that's clearly unsafe for consumption. Students regularly get sick. The meat is often unidentifiable. The ingredients are suspect. Multiple episodes show the cafeteria as a source of contamination. But the school keeps serving the same dangerous food rather than improving quality or safety standards. Mrs. Crabapple's complete burnout shows what happens to staff who might have cared once. She's given up trying to actually teach or protect students. She's just going through motions until retirement. The system has broken her to the point where she can't advocate for student welfare anymore. That's what the school does to people who try to maintain standards. Look at the curriculum and teaching methods. Students aren't being educated to think critically or become successful adults. They're being trained to accept authority, stop asking questions, and maintain mediocrity. The school actively discourages excellence and punishes students like Lisa who try to learn. This is systematic suppression of human potential. The district's funding decisions reveal priorities. Money that should go to safety repairs goes to vanity projects or administrative overhead. When the school gets windfalls, they waste money rather than fixing fundamental problems. This isn't incompetent budgeting. This is deliberately choosing not to invest in student welfare. Special attention to Skinner's role is necessary. He's a veteran with PTSD, living with an abusive mother, working a job he's clearly unhappy with. He maintains dangerous conditions out of some combination of learned helplessness, following orders, and possibly genuine belief that children don't deserve better. His military background taught him to maintain systems even when they're harmful. The school board meetings show decisions being made with zero consideration for student welfare. Board members discuss policies that clearly harm children without expressing concern. They cut programs, reduce safety spending, and approve policies that create danger. These aren't ignorant decisions. They're deliberate choices to harm children. Think about what kind of system benefits from a population of poorly educated, psychologically damaged, physically endangered children. The school is creating future citizens who expect nothing from institutions, accept terrible conditions as normal, and don't have the knowledge or skills to demand better. That's useful for maintaining power structures that exploit people. The few students who might escape this system get special attention to keep them down. Bart's intelligence gets suppressed through punishment rather than channeled constructively. Lisa's excellence gets marginalized and mocked rather than rewarded. Martin's skills get him socially destroyed. Any student showing potential for actual success gets systematically crushed. The parent involvement is revealing too. Most parents know the school is terrible but send their kids anyway because they have no alternatives. Wealthy families send their kids to private schools. Poor families get stuck with Springfield Elementary. This is educational segregation that ensures class barriers remain permanent. The long-term outcomes prove the system's purpose. Most Springfield Elementary graduates become working-class citizens, trapped in the same cycles as their parents. Very few escape to better lives. The school successfully prevents social mobility by ensuring students never develop the skills or knowledge to improve their circumstances. Standardized test results must be catastrophic, but the school never faces consequences. Either the district hides the data, or the state education department doesn't care about Springfield students. Either way, children are being systematically failed without any accountability for the adults responsible. The building itself could be condemned if proper inspections happened. The fact that it remains open despite obvious hazards means someone with power has decided Springfield's children aren't worth protecting. This isn't neglect, this is policy. Springfield Elementary isn't failing by accident. It's designed to produce damaged, compliant citizens who won't question authority, and every authority figure involved knows exactly what they're doing to an entire generation of children. Next up is the Cletus's hidden intelligence theory. Cletus seems like Springfield's biggest idiot, but his massive family, survival abilities, and complete avoidance of the system's control suggest he might be smarter than everyone, just playing the role that benefits him most. Look at the practical skills Cletus demonstrates. He runs a functional farm that produces food. He repairs equipment without professional help. He builds structures that work. He navigates complex legal and social systems well enough to avoid taxes, regulations, and institutional control. Those aren't skills that stupid people have. Those are sophisticated abilities that require intelligence and planning. His family size is the biggest clue to his intelligence. Cletus has dozens of children with Brandine, and somehow he feeds them, houses them, and keeps them alive in conditions that would destroy a normal family. The logistics of managing that many people require organizational skills, resource management, and strategic thinking. He's running a complex operation disguised as hillbilly chaos. The financial impossibility of his situation proves deliberate strategy. Cletus has no documented income, pays no taxes, receives maximum government benefits, and somehow supports a massive family. He's either a financial genius who's gamed every social welfare system, or he's running underground operations that generate untraceable income. Either way, he's outsmarted the entire economic system. Think about the social benefits of playing dumb in Springfield. Smart people like Lisa get mocked and isolated. Frink gets ignored. Comic book guy gets dismissed. But Cletus gets left alone. Nobody expects anything from him. Nobody investigates his activities, and nobody questions his lifestyle. He's achieved perfect freedom through strategic stupidity. His knowledge of survival skills goes way beyond what television-educated Springfield residents possess. Cletus can hunt, farm, build, repair, and survive completely independent of civilization's infrastructure. If society collapsed tomorrow, Cletus and his family would thrive while everyone else starved. That's not accident. That's preparation. Look at how he navigates legal systems. Cletus avoids arrest despite activities that should draw law enforcement attention. He knows exactly which laws he can break without consequences and which ones he needs to appear to follow. He's mastered the art of staying just inside legal boundaries while doing exactly what he wants. The way he talks is strategic performance. Cletus uses rural dialect and simple vocabulary, but listen to the actual content of what he says. He makes surprisingly astute observations about social dynamics, expresses complex ideas clearly, and demonstrates understanding of sophisticated concepts. He's not uneducated. He's hiding his education behind an accent. His relationship with Brandine shows partnership between equals. They're running their operation together, making strategic decisions, and presenting a united front to the outside world. This isn't man controlling woman or vice versa. This is two intelligent people working as team to achieve shared goals. Think about what Cletus has avoided by playing dumb. No one expects him to get a regular job. He's exempt from social expectations about career success. He doesn't have to participate in consumer culture or maintain middle-class appearances. He's completely free from the rat race that traps everyone else. His children are being raised with the same strategic approach. They're learning survival skills, self-sufficiency, and how to avoid institutional control. Cletus is preparing the next generation to live free from the systems that enslave normal citizens. That's long-term strategic thinking. The few times Cletus shows unexpected knowledge, people dismiss it as lucky accident rather than adjusting their understanding of his intelligence. He'll make sophisticated reference or demonstrate advanced skill, and everyone explains it away because it doesn't fit their preconceptions. He's using their prejudice against him as camouflage. Look at his property. He owns land outright, which most Springfield residents don't. He has productive farmland generating food and potentially income. He has assets that provide security and independence. While everyone else is in debt, Cletus has accumulated actual wealth by living outside normal economic systems. The hillbilly persona gives him social advantages too. People underestimate him in negotiations and interactions. They don't see him as threat or competition. They don't bother trying to exploit him because they assume he has nothing worth taking. Meanwhile, he's quietly accumulating resources and living better than most of them. His avoidance of medical, educational, and governmental systems means he's never tracked, recorded, or controlled by institutions. He exists in official records minimally, which provides privacy and freedom that normal citizens can't achieve. He's essentially invisible to surveillance and data collection. Think about the stress everyone else in Springfield endures. Jobs they hate, bosses who abuse them, debt crushing them, expectations exhausting them. Cletus has none of that. He lives exactly how he wants, spending time with his family, working his land, and answering to no one. He's achieved what everyone else claims to want, but can't figure out how to get. The really brilliant part is that he's convinced everyone his success is failure. People look at Cletus and think he's losing at life. Meanwhile, he's winning on terms he chose for himself, living free while everyone else serves systems that exploit them. Cletus isn't dumb. He's figured out that playing the hillbilly gets him freedom from society's demands while letting him live exactly how he wants, and everyone who looks down on him is actually the sucker working for the system he's escaped. That's the end of today's video. If you guys enjoyed our video, then subscribe to our channel, and I'll see you in the next one.